not my cattle prod. I'm just holding it for our friends.
The Alpha then chases Scott, grabs him by the leg, pulls him back, and roars right in his face. And that roar is mediocre.
Teen Wolf wasn't a dog. Teen Wolf was a lifestyle.
If there's one thing the Alpha does not appreciate, it's anticlimax.
Just being able to find so much joy in Teen Wolf.
Welcome to Return to Beacon Hills, a Teen Wolf rewatch podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Kate Colvin, and I'm joined by
Calissa Mullis.
And Will Wallace.
Every week, we'll be watching and talking about the hit MTV series one episode at a time. And this week, we're talking about Season 1, Episode 7, Night School. If you're watching Teen Wolf for the first time and you're worried about spoilers, have no fear. This podcast is broken up into two sections, Alpha and Beta. The Beta section is for first-timers who are just now finding this awesome series and don't want to be spoiled about what's to come. The second section, Alpha, is where we go full spoilers and talk about not just the current episode, but the entire Teen Wolf series, as well as its place in the fandom. In the show notes of your podcast app of choice, you'll find time codes for the Alpha and Beta sections. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at RTBH Podcast, as well as on Tumblr and TikTok at Return to Beacon Hills. If you'd like to ask us questions or offer suggestions for future topics to discuss, you can email us at returntobeaconhills@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, you can find us on Patreon at RTBH Podcast. There, our Wolfie patrons will gain access to awesome exclusives, like early access to episodes, full moon AMAs, the Beacon Hills Movie Club, where we watch and provide commentary for movies starring the amazing cast of Teen Wolf and featuring the work of our talented crew, as well as guest video interviews and a monthly watch party. So head on over to patreon.com/RTBH podcast and join the pack.
Tonight's episode, Night School, was written by Jeff Flaming and directed by Tim Andrew. Reeling from seeing the Alpha seemingly kill Derek, Scott and Stiles run into the high school and find themselves trapped inside by the monster. A faked text, apparently from Scott's number, brings Allison to the school along with Lydia and Jackson. Tensions flare among the group as they try to survive the night, with Stiles trying to protect his dad and Scott's secret, and Scott trying to fight his own increasingly violent instincts.
For our favorite quote from this episode, we have from Stiles, "Really beautiful job, everyone. Now, what should we do about the 20-foot wall of windows?" He says that right after they run into a room and everyone's piling everything up against the door, ignoring the giant wall of windows that he's trying to point out, but everyone just is ignoring poor Stiles.
They make a great barricade, like a really good one. It's just,
there's
pointless.
windows.
Completely pointless. It's great. I feel like that's a great moment because I feel like if you're paying attention, they don't hide the windows. It's not like a reveal because the windows are behind him in his shots.
The whole time.
Right.
And it's just if you're paying attention, you're like, oh, I see the problem, but they're so scared and not thinking about it. And then you get the great punchline.
For honorable mention, we actually have two more quotes that come from Stiles because, he's just on this episode. Well, he is this every episode.
So on.
This one's great. So the first one would be, "A psychotic werewolf who's into teamwork. That's beautiful." And the second one would be whenever he's telling Jackson that he will not call his father. "I mean, no. You want to hear it in Spanish? No." He does it much better. Dylan O'Brien's just everything when it comes to comedy.
It's very true. He's got it dialed in.
So this episode opens just moments after they see Derek being eviscerated by the Alpha, and Scott and Stiles run into the high school for cover.
I really like this. Teen Wolf, dear listeners, I'm going to say this a lot, dear listeners, because y'all are dear listeners, but there are many, many episodes of Teen Wolf that start immediately after the end of the previous episode. Teen Wolf was very much a hyper-serialized TV show. It's not the type of show where you're like, oh, I've heard Teen Wolf is pretty good. I think they just aired their 4th episode. I'm just going to jump in and I'll probably catch up. It's like, no, son, you're not going to catch up at all. You need to go back and rewatch. I mean, yeah, we have the previously ons, but the previously ons are only 30 seconds, I think, if that. And they're very specific to the episode that you're about to watch. So you're not getting full context of everything that's come before. But I do love when we have episodes that just start immediately right after the previous episode, because that's how they just flow into one another. Because it is we've talked about in the past, making the show is making a movie every week. So basically you're getting 12 movies every season and it's just one giant story and you just kind of get little pieces of it. But I do love that this just starts with him slamming the doors closed and Derek's out there bleeding out somewhere and it's awful.
Poor Derek.
Poor Derek.
So much blood. He's just trying so hard, but Scott is so bad at this. Also, Derek makes him bad at this.
Derek is also very, very bad at this. We want to be clear on that issue. When we say poor Derek, we're not saying, he does such a good job. We're saying he tries very hard. I think that much can be said for Derek. He does try very hard.
Gold star all the way.
He has many gold stars on like the board of gold stars. It's just, he's not great at this to begin with, but he tries so hard. But he's also dealing with a pupil who's also not great at this. It's just like, you have like two negatives just kind of pushing each other apart at the same time, but one of them is really trying to help the other, but it's just, they're so bad at this. But hey, that's where all of this drama comes from, right? I mean, it wouldn't be nearly as much fun if Derek was a completely competent teacher and Scott was a completely competent student. And they were just like, because then the story would be over. They would know already who the alpha is and it would be over with.
It probably wouldn't even
You're right. No, that wouldn't be one. It would be like one episode and it'd be like, oh my God, I was bitten by a werewolf. Oh, the alpha is this person. The end.
Right.
So good. So
it's really the whole first season, probably even more of the show, is like, what happens when characters have circumstances thrust upon them that they don't have the emotional skill set necessary to deal with. And that's pretty much that's what the story comes from. If they had the emotional skill sets to deal with these things, we wouldn't have a show.
We'd have College Wolf. College years.
That's right. Or we'd have well-adjusted adult Wolf. It's a very different program.
Exactly. He's just working to get that 401k filled up. saving up some sick days so next year he and the missus can take off to Bermuda for 3 weeks. I don't know. So yeah, but one thing I would like to say about the opening of this episode is we've seen the alpha before, but I feel like in this teaser we get a great shot of the alpha coming around the back of the car, and you really get a good look at the alpha. And I think the design is great. I'll be honest, this design is not my favorite type of werewolf. If you want to see my favorite type of werewolf design, watch The Howling. Fantastic. Love those werewolves. But
I'm a big fan of whichever Howling has the little like wombat werewolf babies.
That would be part 3. That would be part 3 with the marsupial werewolf.
The marsupials. Isn't that what it's called? It's like
it's the marsupials. Howling 3 with the
it's
marsupials.
The Howling 3 : marsupials.
But the design of the alpha really feels like it was inspired by the werewolf from American Werewolf in London, where it's always down on all fours, crouching, and it's very sleek and fast, and I think it's a lot of fun. What do y'all think? Do y'all like the design?
I didn't have a problem with the design. My only criticism would be I feel like we saw a little too much of it.
I agree.
I'm a big proponent of the idea that what you create in your head is always going to be scarier than anything they could put on screen. So I kind of like more the suggestion of danger, just red eyes flashing in the shadows or a silhouette that's slightly out of focus. I like that kind of stuff, but I do realize that that's a personal preference. So I'm sure there were plenty of people who watched Night School and were like, yeah, finally we get to see all of the alpha and see what it looks like. That's just not me. That's not my preference.
I got you.
Jaws would have been a very different film, though, if the shark had actually been working. So they're trying to keep the alpha from getting in through the doors. And so they see the bolt cutters that they had used to get into the school outside. And for some reason, Stiles is the one who has to run out to grab them. And I definitely feel like Scott should have been the one to do it. He is the one who is a werewolf.
He's definitely the less breakable of the two of them.
Yes.
Exactly. But I do think this shows that Stiles is brave and he doesn't hesitate to do what needs to be done.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like he is impulsive to the point of recklessness, but you're right. He is incredibly brave. And this I think just definitely shows he will throw himself into harm's way if it means saving somebody he cares about, which obviously he cares about Scott. They're best friends since they were kids. His big mouth gets him into a lot of trouble sometimes, but it does feel like Stiles does lead from the front sometimes.
Right.
So like he's not even worried about himself. He's just going to go do it.
Yeah, I feel like Teen Wolf is really great at these super tiny character moments.
Agreed.
And I love doing a rewatch where we can analyze those. Really satisfies the English major in me. Through a window, they notice that Stiles' Jeep has been damaged. His car battery comes flying through the window. And I love this. The alpha is just such a dick. And it's hilarious. But the claw marks on the battery are a great end to this teaser.
It is. It's fantastic.
They also just like, he was clearly listening to them and like waited for the right moment to throw it.
This episode is really where you come to understand the Alpha's love for drama. The whole time I felt like the Alpha had written a script for this whole adventure with all the mise en scène planned out. It was like, oh, and then I'll chase them into this room, and then this is going to happen, and it's going to be great, and I can't wait to see their faces, because so much of it is done purely for dramatic flair, and I feel like the Alpha does have dramatic flair. The Alpha is sitting there with the car battery, being like dropping eaves on their conversation, just like, I'm going to pick the perfect moment to chuck this car battery through the window. And then he heard that part of their discussion and went, oh, this is my moment, threw it in there. And it was just perfectly timed for maximum dramatic flair. But at the same time, it is intimidating because previously we had seen the Alpha, for the most part, behave like a wild animal.
Yeah.
And this is not that. This is planned. Calculated, exactly. Premeditated. This is not someone who's out of control, right? Yeah. This is someone who's totally in control. And this is what they're choosing to do with that control. And that's worrisome.
Very. I feel like this is building upon what happened in the previous episode when Scott is chased by the Alpha into his car. And then instead of attacking, the Alpha draws the spiral, because it's like, this is intelligence, and then with this episode, it's like, no, okay, this is intelligence and it's using it against us. Like we are right where it wants us to be. It's using tools and it's using knowledge to gain the upper hand at all times. And that's scary. Because it's one of those things where it's like, if you're being chased by a rabid dog and you're like in the school, you can just like go into a closet or something. It's not, they don't have opposable thumbs, so they're not getting through the door. But then it's like, well, but then you have something that's like, that understands how doorknobs work or keys. It's even worse. Like, what if it locked you inside or put something in front of the door to keep you there? So it's really wonderful, but it's also very terrifying.
Since the school is climate controlled, Scott and Stiles are now trapped inside the school. So they hide in the lockers in the boys' locker room because that's the room that they think of that would have the fewest windows.
Also, I feel like it would just smell so much. It'd be really hard for the Alpha to come find them right away. He'd be like,
that's true.
By all of these like Axe body spray. It just smells so much like teenage boy. I can't even tell which teenage boy I'm looking for.
And teen spirit. Yeah, definitely.
It's fantastic. That's fantastic. The Alpha clearly didn't think this through. But when they're hiding in the locker room, they do get stalked by a mysterious shape. And Scott and Stiles throw themselves into lockers and try to stay as quiet as possible as this shape, this shadow is moving through the locker room. And you believe it's the Alpha, and he's right outside Scott's locker and he throws open the door, but it's just the janitor and he scares them all half to death.
Old man Jenkins.
Old man Jenkins? No, I think I named him Slappy.
You did.
His name is Slappy the janitor. And did y'all know?
He's really committed to this joke.
I am. I'm still committed to this joke. This is Slappy the janitor. And interesting fact, he is 3 days from retirement.
Oh, tragic.
And then the Alpha attacks and kills him horribly. And Kate, was it you who really liked what happens here?
Yeah. Well, I just love a good victim gets dragged away by unseen assailant shot. And Teen Wolf has many of those. I love how immediately Stiles throws himself into a locker. I feel like he has spent time there. He knows how this goes. That is a semi-natural habitat for him.
It's his safe space.
Allison was supposed to get picked up by Scott, but he's just left her standing out front of her house until she receives a cryptic text message, seemingly from Scott, and she decides to go to the school along with Jackson and Lydia when Lydia worries about Allison being stood up. Scott and Stiles think they've found a way out, but the Alpha has moved a dumpster in front of the doors, leaving them stuck inside the school.
This is another great bit where the wild animal is proving that it knows how to use tools, and it's very scary. But I will say, when we were rewatching this episode, Scott, buddy, you got super strength, man. Those dumpsters were moving. Like, it was difficult, but they were moving. You could have really pushed those doors open. But then I was imagining, like, Stiles saying, like in an alternate version of that scene, Stiles is like, use your super strength. And Scott, like, eyes glow and he pushes and he can't do it. And they peer out through the crack and they see there's like a Ford Taurus or something pushed up against the dumpsters too. So it's just like even worse or something like that. But
Project placement, Teen Wolf was great at that.
absolutely, it was always seamless.
So Allison and the others get to the school and they notice that one of the doors has been propped open and they think that Scott and Stiles might have broken in. It's very conveniently propped open with the bolt cutters that they use to get into the school. Like, how obvious could one be?
As I said, the Alpha loves some good mise en scène. He's trying to put that information in frame.
Allison decides to go inside to look for Scott and is surprised when Jackson actually looks concerned for her. But I do really like that Jackson's concerned in this scene. It's great.
It's an interesting dynamic that they have in this episode because Jackson is very much pulling away from Lydia. He's making a lot of snide comments towards her, and yet he is showing a little bit of softness toward Allison, and Lydia definitely notices.
Do you guys think that he was actually into Allison, though? Like, they have an interesting dynamic for the couple episodes around here, but I don't actually get a sense that he has romantic feelings for her.
I don't believe he does. I feel like these are just little moments of his actual humanity coming out when those little bits are able to get past everything that's supposed to be self-serving for him.
Yeah.
Because he's definitely one of those people that if he does something, it's because it benefits him in some way. And I feel like this is just that his actual humanity coming out a little bit. He's not a bad person. It's just his fatal flaw is he has a belief that he is not good enough based on being an adopted child and that he has to always prove himself and that everything he does is adding to that having to prove himself. Like he's so good at everything. He's in perfect shape because then, oh my God, if I'm such a great lacrosse player, people will like me and then I'll feel really a part of my family. Like they'll really want me, stuff like that. And so everything he does is self-serving for this horrible reason, that doesn't even need to exist at all. But then you have these great little moments where his actual humanity comes out, his actual true self just kind of peeks through the clouds just a little bit, but then sadly it goes away again just as fast. And I feel like that's because of Lydia, but I don't mean it to be like, well, it's Lydia's fault. I feel like Lydia and Jackson together are just a toxic couple towards each other and because of each other. Like Lydia needs Jackson, Jackson needs Lydia. They believe there are roles that need to be fulfilled and that they are the opposite to each other that will help them fulfill that role, but they're just awful for each other. They're just not good for each other at all. So
right, because I do think as much as I think Jackson is awful to Lydia in this episode, and she does intentionally or not feed into his greatest neurosis. Right. I mean, we have her saying things like, oh, do you want to be a little high school amateur or do you want to go pro? It is feeding into this sense of inadequacy that he has. She's not a hypocrite. She applies those same exacting standards to herself that she applies to him and to others. But that doesn't make it healthy for anyone involved.
No.
Who closes the door behind Allison? It just like slowly creeps shut after she's entered. And I'm like, okay, did the Alpha do that? Because Jackson's standing right there. It's very dramatic.
Exactly how it happened.
It's dramatic and it looks great. But if you do think about it, you're like, did the Alpha just like creep up on his little Alpha tiptoes right behind the door, just like nudging it shut with one claw and hoping that nobody looked over at that particular moment? Like
Allison doesn't even look back. He does it purely for his own benefit.
I know how
now
to do
that
this.
I believe. He loves drama.
The Alpha was hiding behind Stiles' Jeep, just crouched down. He's like looking through the window, like make sure everybody's looking the right way. And he had tied dental filament all the way to the bolt cutters, and he was just waiting for this little moment. He watches it go in, and he just pulls it, and it falls down, and it closes perfectly. He was like, nailed it.
Then he high-fived himself like Will does.
Did he buy the dental filament from the Acme Corporation?
Probably, yes. Yes, exactly. So he and Wile E. Coyote both have memberships too. Yeah, so it's fantastic. So that's what I like to imagine. Because you're absolutely right. How did that happen? Why didn't she look back? I mean, it's great because it's a great. I think that's our first act out. And it's fantastic. It's haunted house stuff. Doors open and close in haunted houses all the time. Why? I don't know, but it's always fun. Like, because it's just this creepy trope that kind of has to happen, but it's just fun. It's great.
I like your comparison to Wile E. Coyote because I feel like the Wile E. Coyote, the Alpha keeps going after Scott and he just never catches him. It's just a classic Roadrunner situation.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like at the end of this episode, he should just be like, maybe I should find someone else.
Yeah. The Alpha is, it's definitely a very like Sisyphus type thing. Like, bro, after the 17th time the boulder rolls back down the hill, you should reevaluate your objectives here.
Yeah.
So Stiles uses a diversion to lure the Alpha into a room and slam the door. He and Scott use a desk to keep the door closed, but the Alpha escapes by breaking through the ceiling tiles. I just think the Alpha is really caught up in the sunk cost fallacy of turning Scott and trying to recruit him. I mean, he could have turned half of Beacon Hills at this point instead of chasing after this one dumb 16-year-old.
He has to know by now that it's probably not going to happen, or if it is, it's going to be like pulling fangs and it's going to take forever. Just find someone who's not a 16-year-old boy.
I would have personally loved to see him turn coach. What do you think that would have been like?
Oh my God. Coach would be so disappointed when he realized that like drugs don't work on werewolves.
He just bought all that cocaine.
Like, yeah,
I can't use it.
There goes that coke habit.
He's just going to sell it all to teenagers.
Oh,
he totally would.
He totally would.
But like only to lacrosse players so that they're better at lacrosse.
Yeah.
So Jackson and Lydia end up going inside to try to find Allison when she doesn't come back right away. She made the mistake of saying, "I'll be right back." While Lydia runs to the bathroom, Jackson catches a glimpse of the Alpha.
And it's great. It's a great shot.
Good.
It's shadowy and in the distance, so it keeps that mystique. That's the kind of shot that I really like and wanted the episode to be pretty much exclusively that instead of the bigger shots of the werewolf. But the episode has both.
Night School is my favorite episode of season 1. And this moment between Colton and I guess you can say the Alpha is my favorite moment in this episode. It's so good. It's just creepy and super weird and startling because Colton is a really good actor. And there's so much going on right here on his face as he sees a figure. And he's like, Scott? Because the outline's a human being. It's, nothing weird here. But then that outline changes as the human gets on all fours and looks away. And then feels like you see the blood drain from his face. And then Lydia comes right back out. It's fantastic. It's really, really well done. More of that humanity coming out. Because, again, he's not a bad person. He's just super self-serving. And that just leads him to do awful, awful things. But then you have moments like this, and it just reinforces that, hey, remember, they are 16. This character is a kid, and he is in way over his head, and he just doesn't know it. And it makes it really scary, when you do remember that these are kids running around a school at night with a monster.
I feel like they really knocked it out of the park with the casting of the core cast.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like they all just nailed it. They just nailed it. And it's little moments like this that just prove how good they all are. Russell
Mulcahy and Jeff Davis should just be constantly patting themselves on the back for recognizing the talent that they saw there with Bobblehead.
Hearing telltale noises from the ceiling, Scott, Stiles, Allison, Lydia, and Jackson run into the chemistry classroom. Despite Stiles' protests, the others barricade themselves in the room, failing to notice the massive windows along one wall.
I'm just so impressed by Holland's ability to run in the heels she wears in this episode.
Yeah, that was something we talked to Barbara about.
Right.
Was that Holland is deeply skilled at the art of doing all sorts of, physical activity, wearing impressive skyscrapers of footwear.
Take that, Lost World. Team will beat you to it by 5 years.
I was actually thinking about that when we were talking to Barbara, but it's completely different because, as Barbara pointed out, Lydia didn't dress to go monster hunting. She wasn't out there planning to go running through the woods in her shoes, or she didn't go to the school thinking, I'm going to be running through these halls in these heels.
Yeah.
Do you think all the running on Teen Wolf fully prepared Dylan O'Brien for the Maze Runner?
He probably still had to do some more running, if I had to guess.
A little bit more.
Although I think Beacon Hills is probably a labyrinthine town because there's a lot happening there, as we've discussed before.
Cornered and confused, Allison tries to get Scott to explain what's going on, prompting Scott to blurt out that Derek is the one who killed his sister, the bus driver, and the video store employee, all from previous episodes, and that now he's in the school with them trying to kill them all. And this kind of comes out of nowhere.
Poor Derek.
Poor Derek.
Right? I feel like, Scott just really commits to this plan. He just doubles down. They're like, Derek, really? He's like, yes. Oh my God. Totally Derek. I mean, I just don't understand why. It's a terrible plan.
Again, and they even are like, are you sure it's Derek? So they give him a moment where he could be like, well, it looked like Derek, or and so he's like, I'm 100% certain that was Derek. He murdered his sister and a video store clerk and a janitor, and he's trying to kill us, and we're all gonna die. They're like,
why?
And I mean, from Allison, it's like, didn't he drive me home from a party that one time? Like, why would he do that and then chase me to a school to kill me? I don't understand what you're talking about.
It's just such a terrible plan. And after what has happened at the school so far, I don't know how they believe it's just a human killer that's after them. I mean, maybe a Jason Voorhees, but not just like a regular dude.
Beacon. But you're absolutely right. It's definitely because the alpha falls through the ceiling and chases him. Someone had to have looked back and seen clearly not human shapes, but you're right. He just double and triples down on this story, and it really did not have to be so complicated. He could have just been like, Stiles and I were here at the school. Someone attacked us. Now they're trying to kill all of us.
Right.
That's all you need.
Because that's the thing. Like I was thinking about it. Like I understand that he doesn't want to tell them the truth, of course. And I understand that he wants to tell them something because they're looking to him for some kind of explanation of what's going on and why he told them all to run into this room. But I don't really see the benefit of being like, it was Derek. Because he doesn't gain anything more from that than he would have by saying, oh, Stiles and I came here to play a prank, and then I was going to go hang out with you, but then, I don't know, some crazy person tried to attack us and killed the janitor, and we didn't get a good look at them because we were running away.
Right.
That would have had, if anything, it would have worked better because they wouldn't have had so many follow-up questions like, why would he do that? How can you be so certain that it's Derek and that he has a motive to kill all of us?
Yeah.
Right? It would have made a lot more sense to be like, I don't know, some maniac did it with
machete,
or and like had a weapon, killed the janitor, and I don't know what they want, but they attacked me and Stiles for no reason. So I kind of feel like we have to assume that they're armed and dangerous, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Works just as well. Fewer follow-up questions. And it's just, and then Stiles kind of pulls him aside and is like, what the hell was that? Why did you just throw Derek under the bus? And he's like, I don't know. It's like, if Derek's dead, then it's fine. Which Scott was the one who was insisting that Derek might not be dead. And I feel like I understand Stiles's point that like, oh, blood was spurting out of his mouth. But Scott can hear heartbeats, and he didn't say, well, I heard his heart stop beating. But then Scott's the one being like, well, you said he was probably dead, and that sounded rightish. And so I decided, why not just put all this on Derek? And it's like, well, because it doesn't really benefit you to do that. It makes it harder to explain. If he's not dead, he's going to have to go on the lam. And if he is dead, it kind of sucks that, I mean, I know you didn't like the guy, but he wasn't a cold-blooded murderer. And now that's what he's going to be remembered for. Best case scenario here, right? Yeah. It's a rubbish plan.
It's a rubbish plan.
Now, Stiles, afraid for his father's safety, poses calling the police, but Lydia calls anyway. Unfortunately for them, someone called in an anonymous tip that there would be prank calls that night about a break-in at the high school, so the operator just hangs up on her.
That's not how that should work.
Right. I don't think the sheriff would be on board with this plan of like, oh yeah, we'll just ignore all those calls.
Exactly. I definitely feel like based on pop culture, if I was a police operator and someone called and said, hey, apparently like some kids are going to break into a local high school tonight and they're going to vandalize the place and you're probably going to get some calls about it. Don't worry about it. I'll be like, oh yeah, thanks, sir. I'll totally not worry about it. Hello, police chief. I think we need to worry about something.
Get Batman on the phone right now.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're so understaffed that you can't send anyone, why not just send a car? And if it is kids just jerking your chain, be like, okay, we're going to call your parents. Or, we're going to threaten that we're going to charge you with
tomfoolery.
Tomfoolery in the second degree.
being hoodlums. Yeah, like, unless they honestly couldn't spare one person, it feels like that makes a lot more sense because, one, you could dissuade kids from doing that again, and two, in case that person has nefarious plans, you at least did some due diligence, right?
Right.
Absolutely. Because, I mean, honestly, I feel like this should just be a due diligence thing.
Yeah.
It's like we should always check, just because the one time you don't is the one time that's on
That all the
national
teenagers
news
get murdered.
that all the
Yeah.
teenagers get murdered at Beacon
They get
Hills High
murdered.
School. That's what that is. So, but I was honestly thinking, it's like, I wish a patrol car had come by. I love the shows Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, and very different shows to this. But one thing they do is they definitely always show characters working through a plan, that they try every possible way to achieve something or to get out of a problem instead of just kind of jumping over stuff with, oh, they call the cops and they said they got reports of prank calls, so they're not sending anybody. It's like, no, well, I'm Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul. It's like they call the cops and the cop come. But then that creates a new problem, or the villain or whatever goes and talks to the cops.
Right. Like in Die Hard.
Like in Die Hard.
Like in Die Hard, where they're like
in Die Hard.
Yeah, right, where they're like, sir, this is a prank call. And he's like, then come the down here and arrest me.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. What if a patrol car had come and then someone walks out and they're like on the third floor or the second floor and they can't really see who it is, but someone walks out in like a security uniform and they're talking to the cop and they're like, wait, who is? They're like, we don't have nighttime security. And you see this person just talking to the cop and pointing and all this stuff. And then the cop's just like, yep, gets back in and drives away. And then the person turns around and their eyes glow red, for just a second. That would have been awesome, I think. But I feel like you should always create more problems.
That would have left a trail, though, because if they were able to talk to
you would have to have a different episode. Like, it wouldn't have ended the same way. But I'm very much a proponent of no free passes when it comes to story and drama. That I feel like characters should always do whatever they can to solve a problem, and that we should see it.
So Allison tries to get Scott to explain why Derek would want to hurt them, whether he sent her the phony text from Scott and whether he called in the anonymous tip. Scott loses his temper with her and immediately regrets it. And speaking only to Stiles, Scott suggests that the Alpha might have sent the text to Allison because he wants revenge against her and her family of werewolf hunters. But it's Scott's urging that gets Stiles to finally go ahead and call his dad, but all he gets is the voicemail. Instead of the events of the tell, I feel like what happened in this episode should have led to Stiles being angry with Scott. I mean, Scott's the one to push Stiles into calling, even though he knows Stiles is worried about the Alpha potentially just slaughtering the police if they show up, including his father. I stand by that it makes no sense that Stiles was angry at Scott because of what happened with the mountain lion. I mean, there was nothing that Scott could have done, and also, I feel like his dad was never in any more danger than anyone else there.
Right.
But in this episode, it's not completely rational because there's not a lot that Scott could do in this moment. But also, I do understand where Stiles is coming from. I mean, he doesn't want to put his father at risk.
Right.
So I would completely understand if because of this, he would be angry with Scott.
I agree. I think it makes a lot more sense because Jackson's being an asshole, but that's Jackson's brand. I don't think
Typical
that,
Jackson.
That doesn't shock Stiles. I mean, it like mildly irritates him, but I think it feels like more of a betrayal for Scott to urge Stiles to call his dad because Scott is the only other person there who really knows what's going on. So he's fully aware that Stiles has this understandable fear that if they call his dad could get hurt or killed. I don't have a problem with characters sometimes behaving in a way that isn't rational, because we all sometimes behave in a way that isn't rational. The problem is that with the whole thing in Heart Monitor, where Stiles was mad at Scott because of what happened in the tell, I just didn't even really buy it.
Right.
I understand that people behave irrationally, but I didn't even really understand what Stiles' irrational perspective was there. Because what did he want Scott to do? I wasn't clear on that. But here, I agree with you. I think that would have made a lot of sense that, like, sure, rationally, you would understand that they had very few options here. And at least, the sheriff is an authority figure where the Alpha, being a person who can think, probably doesn't want to be any more on the local authorities' radar than they already are. And also his point that at least the sheriff is armed, and while wolfsbane laced bullets are more effective on werewolves, a regular bullet ain't nothing. I mean, it'll slow them down, and that's more than the kids might be capable of. So even though I think that Stiles would know all those things rationally, it's totally understandable that he would feel betrayed by Scott being like, well, despite all your concerns about your dad getting hurt, call him anyway.
Right.
Scott then comes up with a plan. He will go retrieve the keys from the janitor's body, and then they'll all take a stairwell up to the roof and use the fire escape to make their getaway. But since he's unarmed and Allison doesn't know about his superpowers, she fears that Derek will kill him right away if he tries to leave the chemistry room. Lydia decides to take advantage of their location and make a self-igniting Molotov cocktail to throw at the threat. Jackson assists her, but seems distracted.
Again, werewolf strength Scott. I feel like he should have just picked up like some sort of heavy object and pretended to hit that with the door while using his werewolf strength to like knock through the deadbolt or something. I don't know. Yeah. But absolutely. He definitely, I feel like, could have. Even if the dumpster was a bit tricky, there's no reason I feel like he shouldn't have been able to get through this door himself.
No, they could have easily, and he could have hidden it very well.
Yeah,
with just like everyone push a desk together and they don't realize he's using his extra strength to break through the door.
It's a chemistry room. I'm sure there's probably like a fire extinguisher around there. Just take that and start hitting on it.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone, this could be dangerous.
I do think that, again, this is one of those things that a lot of supernatural shows face, which is that narratively different degrees of strength and ability are required in different circumstances.
Yeah.
And so you do kind of end up with like, okay, well, a season ago, a demon was able to smash right through an entire building, but suddenly in this scene, they can't do that. And it's something that happens. I mean, it's definitely something that you would notice watching, for instance, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's like, okay, well, sometimes the vampires are like gods.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're like bodybuilders.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of fluctuation in just how superhuman they are. And I think that that's something that can be really hard to keep consistent because the story is going to require different things. And you would really have to do a lot of storytelling finesse to keep it consistent and yet still have it work in every situation you want to write it in. Allison tells Scott that just as he knows her tell that reveals when she's lying, she can tell when Scott is lying too, and she can tell that he's been lying all night. To her dismay, Scott still insists on going out to get the key, though he is armed with Lydia's Molotov cocktail. At this point, I would like to give a little shout out to Scott's little combed hair and his little side part.
Oh,
it's a puppy wolf.
I didn't comment on, but I love that, Lydia's just like, oh, I read about a Molotov cocktail somewhere. I'm like, okay, where did you read about it that gave in detail a recipe for this, Lydia?
It's the Anarchist Cookbook. She's been reading the Anarchist Cookbook.
No girl trying to pass herself off as dumb, but it's no wonder that Stiles has picked up on how intelligent she really is because everyone else has to be either very self-involved or a complete idiot not to realize how smart
They're very self-involved, though.
Okay, real talk. If I was an alpha, immediately I'd go for Stiles, Lydia, maybe Allison, but I would not go for Scott or Jackson.
Yeah. And then all my baby wolves would be in therapy.
So back in the chemistry room, Lydia worries that Jackson might have handed her the wrong chemical compound, which would result in the Molotov cocktail not lighting properly.
You had one job, Jackson. One job.
And you were a callous individual and intentionally gave her the wrong compound.
I don't understand why Lydia relied on him to hand her anything. Like, it was within her reach. I feel like she should have just read the label herself. I mean, it was like right there. I feel like maybe there should have been some kind of time crunch to where it was like, hand me this, hand me this, hand me this. There was just no time to slow down and take things carefully.
Yeah.
But watching it when it felt a little more, I don't want to say leisurely. Obviously, there was a threat, but it wasn't like an in the next 10 seconds threat.
Yeah.
So it was really just like, don't tell Jackson to hand you the sulfuric acid. Look at the bottle and see if it says sulfuric acid. Don't trust anybody else.
Yeah.
Trust no bitch. But that's an interesting question. You think that Jackson intentionally gave her the wrong thing?
Yeah, I mean, he did. In the previous scene, he reaches for the right bottle, stops himself, and then chooses a different bottle.
I didn't.
100%. His hand reaches for a bottle, he stops, and then
why would he do that?
Yeah,
because he
would
doesn't
do
like
that?
Scott.
Yeah, but he doesn't want Scott to be killed.
I don't know, but that is 100% what happens.
This is when we learned that Jackson is dyslexic and didn't want to admit it to anyone else.
Aw.
Or he's an asshole who doesn't like Scott.
I
That's
do. That just
probably
makes
what
no
it is.
sense.
Yeah,
it makes
I don't
no
know.
sense.
I don't know if I buy that. Oh man, I wish we would have asked Jeff about this because I didn't.
Yeah.
I did not take it that way.
Or Tim.
I took. Yeah.
We asked him.
Because I took it that Jackson was super distracted because of the festering wound on the back of his neck. And that because of that, he was just kind of like, what am I grabbing for? I'm grabbing for this and handing it to her. Even though I did not take it as he made a calculated decision. Because I feel like it doesn't benefit him.
I don't know. Scott's, we've already had this scene where he's like, hey, you know what it's like to be the best. And then someone better than you comes along.
No, but I'm saying like for his own personal safety. Because if Scott leaves the room and then is killed and then the killer shows up and they still have no keys to get to the roof, like then he's just dead too. You can't be a lacrosse pro when you're dead.
That's true.
So I did watch the scene and yeah, we do get that he reaches for the first bottle, but we don't get a moment that makes it seem like we don't get Jackson's, like a shot of Jackson's face. We don't get anything that's like, that really shows that he's calculating this, that this is something he's thinking about. We only see like what his hands do. Like, I wonder if he just doesn't seem to know what actually, like, it's very dark in there and the labels are kind of like facing away from him. So I don't know. Does he just go like, is it this one? No, I think it's this one. And he doesn't check himself because he is a guy who's so confident that he knows everything. Well, he's just a guy with a lot of confidence. So I just don't know if he even wants to like doubt himself.
Or admit that he needs to ask for clarification or, you know, anything like that.
Well, it's different in the script. It says he turns each bottle looking for the right one, then carefully hands it to Lydia. So what they shot's different than what was actually scripted. I still read it as him making a conscious choice.
That to me sounds a lot more intentional than how it read to me on screen. I kind of wonder, given what happens with the wound on the back of his neck, whether he is in some way being influenced by the alpha the way Scott is. That isn't to take responsibility from Jackson. It's more so because I just have a hard time understanding why he would think that would benefit him.
Why would he be influenced by the alpha? The alpha didn't saw him.
No, I know, but remember when the alpha roars and he has that intense pain in his neck?
Right, yeah.
So there's clearly
he's had like some visions of the fire, even though he wasn't at the fire. Well, Derek wasn't at the fire.
And so
possible.
I'm not totally sure how that works. I feel like we don't really get much more of that, but we do see that like when the alpha roars and forces Scott to turn, Jackson feels it too, even though the alpha wasn't the one who clawed him. I'm not sure why that works, but it is something that we see happen.
No, I remember that now. Yes. I don't know. I feel like the scene itself, I mean, I'm just reading it the way I'm reading it, but I do feel like the scene is nebulous enough where we don't get like a reaction. We don't get a close up of him or anything. Like we don't get a decision shot. Yeah, there's not a decision shot. It's just his hand reaching for one and then going for the other, and which, you know, is different than what's in the script. And I feel like once I read that in the script, I feel like that was just a time thing that because it says he checks the label, you know, and it's like, they're like, no. He reaches for one, chooses another one. Cause it's like, we gotta move. Cause like what you're describing, the script is probably multiple shots instead of one shot. Like what's the cleanest action? Armed
with Lydia's concoction, Scott uses his heightened sense of smell to track the janitor's body to the bleachers in the gym. The bleachers start retracting into the wall and Scott narrowly avoids getting crushed while retrieving the janitor's keys. Like I said earlier, I just really feel like this is an example of the sequence of events that the alpha totally had planned. The alpha's like imagining the setup and what it's going to be like. And he's like, yeah, then I fall from the ceiling and, then the janitor's hanging from the bleachers and then they start collapsing. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be so dramatic.
Yes. The alpha knows how to put on a show.
Oh, yeah.
I love this. I think it's really fun and really scary. So Scott narrowly avoids being crushed by the retracting bleachers. And when he gets back out into the gym, there's the alpha. Like they are just having this face off. And so Scott takes a Molotov cocktail and throws it heroically at the alpha, only for it to break on his shoulder and nothing to happen at all.
The alpha actually shakes his head in this moment in like theatrical disappointment. If there's one thing the alpha does not appreciate, it's anticlimax.
He does kind of shake. He's like, oh, what? No, this isn't exciting at all.
Right.
Well, so the alpha shakes his head, but he's still committed to this. He still will just walk away.
Reason, I don't.
Like,
I don't get why.
That could have been the straw that broke the alpha's back, where he was just like, you can't even do that. I guess, I don't know. I just don't have the heart for this anymore. He just kind of slowly walks away, and you get that sad Charlie Brown music. Yes, exactly. Sad Charlie Brown music as the alpha walks away. Poor alpha. You just chose the worst possible beta. But he's committed. He is so committed that he roars in Scott's face, and that roar makes Scott shift into a werewolf. And this is, I think, one of the coolest bits of new mythos that Teen Wolf brings to the werewolf mythology, that an alpha can roar and force a shift onto a person that they've bitten. I think that's just great. That's just so interesting. That. I don't remember ever seeing something like that in a werewolf story where they can affect each other in a way. And
there is a lot of connectedness to the werewolves.
It feels like it's more personal, that it's not just, I bit a person and now they're a monster like I am. It's like, now I bit a person, I'm kind of responsible for this asshole, type of thing, where it's kind of like you need to be like selective in like who you bite, because you're kind of like, they're your kid now type of thing. And I like that. I think that's fun, but I really just do like the alpha being able to force the shift. It seems really interesting and just awful and scary, because of definitely what comes next.
I feel like he just didn't want to be bested by Scott, and that's the only reason why he's still just in this to win it.
Yeah, I could see that. Also, when he forces Scott to shift, Jackson has a reaction too. He experiences this intense pain in the wound in the back of his neck, which is interesting because the alpha is not the one who gave him that wound. He kind of like eyed it right at the video store, but that was Derek. And then the other interesting thing here is that when he forces Scott to shift, Scott's eyes turn red before they turn yellow.
Let's discuss that in spoilers.
Ooh.
Yeah, it really did surprise me that Jackson had a reaction.
Yeah. But I think that maybe goes back to the interconnectedness, that there's something about that all werewolves kind of have each other on their radar a little bit.
That makes sense.
It's a very interesting idea.
Looking murderous, Scott heads back to the chemistry classroom. Before he can go in, he hears Allison's voice, which brings him back from the edge. He breaks the key off in the lock to protect them from himself.
Does anyone ever just feel so bad that Stiles is just cast aside and he means nothing to Scott after all these years? It's always just Allison, Allison, Allison.
They've been friends for years, and Stiles' voice does nothing for him. If anything, it seemed like in previous episodes, when he was losing control, he went after Stiles.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for Scott, the others can hear him on the other side of the door, breaking off the key and walking away from them, which out of context doesn't look great.
It doesn't.
Actually, in context doesn't look great because it's like, why are you so close to losing control on us? We're not even the threat. But luckily for everyone, police vehicles pull into the parking lot outside, from which Derek's car seems to have vanished. And when the police get there, Stiles backs up Scott's story that they saw Derek kill the janitor, but the sheriff and his deputies can't find anyone else inside the school, not even the janitor's body.
Stiles is just such a good friend, always willing to go along with whatever bullshit Scott comes up with.
He is a ride or die. He co-signs on whatever Scott commits to.
I feel like this is kind of a quid pro quo thing, that Scott has been drug out of his house at night many times over the years to go on some adventure, and Stiles is just like, all right, I feel like I should kind of go along with this.
I do think probably on some level Stiles feels some responsibility, because the only reason Scott was there to get bitten was because he wanted to go find half a dead body.
Right.
And I think too, probably until they saw Laura's body, I don't necessarily think that the reality of it sank in. It was like, ooh, a dead body. Nothing exciting ever happens around here. But it's like, that was a person.
Yeah.
It's very Stand By Me.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Which is kind of the abuser's playbook. But, you want to control someone, you cut them off from sort of their emotional safety net.
Yeah.
And very clearly, the Alpha wants to do that with Scott. And one aspect of Scott's emotional safety net is that the main law enforcement officer in town is his best friend's dad, someone that he's known for years. But he forced Scott into a situation where he knows that the sheriff doesn't believe him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because the evidence is gone. So I don't know if the logistics of it quite work out, but maybe that is the motive, that he's like, what are the subtle things I can do to cut him off from everyone who's not me, really?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like he should have done more to try to separate him from Stiles, because Stiles was really everything, I feel like, to Scott in the first season. Well, outside of Allison, but like he was the one who knew when Allison didn't. So
Right.
I feel like it would have made the most sense to me to separate Scott and Stiles.
Yeah.
Maybe he hoped that they would have a fight after this sequence of events, like you had said, but
Maybe,
I
but
guess
he should have done better.
Stiles was just played out at this point. It was like, I'm
What
honestly,
ends?
I can't even continue to be frustrated at you. It's just, I'm just at a baseline frustration, maybe, at this point. So afterward, Stiles is busy being relieved that they survived, but Scott is concerned about something new. He thinks that the Alpha wants him to get rid of his old pack so that he's free and unencumbered to join the Alpha's pack. Getting rid of his old pack means killing the people in his life, namely Allison, Lydia, Jackson, and Stiles. And the worst part is, when the Alpha made him shift, part of him actually wanted to.
Okay, but since when are Lydia and Jackson part of Scott's pack? I mean, Jackson still doesn't seem to like him. Lydia barely tolerates him. Where's this, oh, they're part of my pack, just because they double date sometimes with him and Allison? I don't think so. He
That
should have
creates a
mentioned his
bond.
mom. He should have mentioned his mom. That's what I
Yeah.
don't get. Why he
I
wasn't
think
bringing
it's
up-
more telling about Scott than about the Alpha that is his conclusion. Instead of being like, he wanted me to kill you to Stiles, he says he wanted me to kill my old pack. Allison, Lydia, Jackson, you.
Poor Stiles, listed last. Sure, probably for dramatic effect, but still. I've been like, I've known you the longest. I should be number one.
Okay, buddy. I should be killed first. I should be murdered first. All right.
If we are going in your innermost circle and then concentric circles out from there, I am in the innermost circle. Allison is in your met this month circle.
Yes.
I would expect Kate, you to list me before Will. Sorry.
No,
I've known her
I
longer.
would totally. That makes complete sense. Y'all have known each other longer than we've been friends, so that makes complete sense.
he says that and then he's like softly crying into I can't believe she said that. But yeah, it would be like he wants to make me kill my old pack and then listing first like a coworker that I barely tolerate or something. It's
Yeah.
like, what? Why are they?
Do you
why
remember
are
my
they so
childhood bully? Like,
right? That Jackson's closer to that than he is to Pac, honestly.
Yeah, no, I agree. But also, Deaton's alive. He's out there being treated by
What?
the paramedics. He looks pretty beat up, probably mostly from the beating he took at Derek's hands in the previous episode. But he's still pretty cagey when asked how he escaped the car. It seems like he can only be mysterious.
he's super suspicious.
Yeah. He's
Yeah.
like, what's the most enigmatic answer I can give to a simple question?
That's right. Oh my God, man, how did you get away? Well,
Did I?
how
What?
does anyone get away, really? What does it mean to get away? You know? Scott then tries to smooth things over with Allison because, of course, that's a very high priority for him. But she says that she feels like she can't trust him anymore. He says he'll get a new phone soon and can call her so they can talk things out. But she tells him not to contact her.
It's sad.
Doo, doo,
It's-
doo.
It is.
He's like, I've almost died all night, and this is still the worst part of my night.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
but I feel like that's what makes it so sad. It's great because it feels very genuine, and I don't want to use this like in a pejorative way, but very high school.
I was gonna
It
say,
is.
yeah.
The experience you've just been through, for any other person, this is a life-changing thing. But then at the end, like, this is the worst part for you,
Right.
is that your girlfriend broke up with you.
And we as the audience totally know that this is the worst part for him.
It's heartbreaking to watch because, we all remember what it was like to be stupid high schoolers.
But see, I was never in love with anyone, so I do have to work a little bit to understand.
We were first season Stiles.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What?
I said we were first season Stiles, as in not getting any.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
That's right.
Well, I remember what it was like to be a dumb high schooler in love.
Not getting any.
Not for the podcast, but so yeah, but so Scott's feeling awful, heartbroken, and very small, and we get this great last final shot where the camera's just kind of pulling away from him, and it makes him small in the frame. And
he looks very small.
He looks very small.
Yes.
And it's great. It's fantastic. And what is this, episode 107? Oh, I was about to say, no, this isn't the end of our second act, but still, it's crushing for Scott. And I'm very curious to see how he's going to take it going into the next episode. Probably not well.
Probably not well.
But that's great because that's how we get drama. And drama is fantastic for stories. So.
The next episode's just him listening to Sarah McLachlan and eating ice cream in bed.
I will remember you.
He's just watching those ASPCA dog commercials.
High school friend.
Melissa's like,
those are heartbreaking. Okay, I don't have to stretch my way of thinking to be heartbroken when I see a skinny doggo with their ribs sticking out set to Sarah McLachlan, man. No. I don't got to work for that. All right, Wolfies, that wraps up the beta section for Night School, and now we're about to dive into spoilers, not just for this episode, but for the whole Teen Wolf series. If you want to stay spoiler-free for all of the excellent stories to come, jump out now, and we'll catch you next week. But if this isn't your first time in Beacon Hills and you want to hear more, don't move a muscle. Here comes the alpha.
It wants me in its pack. But I think first, I have to get rid of my old pack.
All right, Wolfies, let's jump over to our interview with Tim Andrew, the director of Night School, and a total of 35 episodes of Teen Wolf. Let's have a listen. Jumping back to my awesome segue, you're awesome too, Tim. And we have a whole bunch of questions that we want to ask you about.
Will's super good at segues. We pretty much leave every transition to him because of that. So.
Yes, I'm pretty mediocre at it. So awesome. Well, let's dive in, shall we?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, first question, Tim. How did Teen Wolf come into your life? How did you find yourself in Atlanta working on this show?
One of my very best friends is Joe Janier, who's the producer of the show. And I'd known him a very long time. We worked together for Roger Corman many years ago, making really awful films.
That's awesome.
But it was a lot of fun. And we had a lot of fun. We liked working together. And that group was like Teen Wolf in a way, because it was a great group of people that had passion for doing it and loved being filmmakers. And even if we were making silly alien movies or whatever we were doing, it was great fun. And he brought me on to Teen Wolf. I had lunch with him and Jeff one day, and to be honest, with the movies, I wasn't a fan of the films, the original films. I thought, they were watch. But I met Jeff, and he had this great mythology, and he was so smart and just had this brilliant take on it. And I was excited right off the bat to do it. So excited that I packed up my family and we drove to Atlanta so that I could work with my old friend Joe and my new friend Jeff.
Very nice. That sounds awesome. So that was a cross-country family move or were y'all were in LA at the time, or were y'all somewhere else?
No, we were here in LA, and
Gotcha.
It was filming in Atlanta. So packed up my family. We were like, this is going to be an adventure. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. We'll go somewhere new and make this new show. And it turned out to be all those things. It was the best decision I could have made.
Fantastic.
So the cast was pretty young when the show started, and for a lot of them, it was their first major TV role. What was it like directing them in the first season versus the last?
It was a great experience, and they, like you said, they all knew at the beginning. Some, like Dylan, Tyler had done other things. He'd been a child actor, and he'd done a lot of stuff, so he knew what it was like to be on set. But for Dylan, I think he got the role via like a YouTube audition or something. Like they were just doing open calls for this role. And even though his dad is a cameraman, I don't know if you know that, but his dad is. Had done a lot of big movies and stuff. So his family was in the industry, but he hadn't been an actor before. And I think on the very first day, what happens on a set is that, you rehearse a scene and the actors stand in certain places in the set, and we know that's where we're going to light them. But while we're lighting, we have stand-ins so the actors can go and rest. And anyway, he was standing on his mark, and his stand-in came up to take over his mark. And he was like, no, this is where I'm going to be. You have to find somewhere else on set to be in the scene if you're going to be in this scene. He wouldn't let it go. He was guarding his mark on the set there until we said, no, it's okay. You can have a cup of coffee, just sit over there, and we'll once we're lit and ready to go, you'll get back, and no one is going to take this spot away from you.
That's fantastic.
So by the end, he's a pro, and he became a pro like instantly. He's fantastic, great, and he's just a naturally gifted actor. So by the end, you're working with pros, but also we'd gone through a journey together. And like I just said, how I packed up my family and went to Atlanta. Everybody had done that. There was obviously an Atlanta crew, but the majority of the cast and myself and Russell and Joe and Jeff, we're all from LA. And when we got there, we all sort of hung out together. So the cast hung out together. Tyler, both Tylers and Dylan, I think, shared a house in the first year or two while we were there. And, we all worked together during the week. And instead of going out and exploring Georgia and making new friends, we just hung out with each other again at the weekends. So it was a very, it was like, in America, you have camps, right, for school kids. So this was like horror camp. It was awesome. Camp to go away and make a horror show, and
that is my dream.
Yeah.
It was like that, and it was great because everybody bonded. And anyway, to answer your question, by the end, after 6 years of working with the same people, you become very close with them. It's people always say movie set's like a family, and that's often the case, but this one particularly. And they were all super, close friends, and it felt like directing either family members or like my kids. They were just, because they were much younger than me, I was like the set dad. And often actually had to be the set dad. Now I think about it. It was very cool. I was very sad when it ended, as was everybody, but it was a great experience.
Yes, it was.
You directed 35 episodes of Teen Wolf. Do you have a favorite episode that you directed, either throughout the series or specifically in season 1?
Well, I know that Will likes Night School, and that was my very first episode. I really do love that episode, and I actually did my homework for this because I was a little nervous when after you called me, Will, because I was like, that'll be fun. Yes, I'd love to see Will again and talk about Teen Wolf. But I then thought, oh my goodness, you know more about the episode than I do. So I watched it again and actually watched a few of them from season 1. And that one I really enjoyed, and I loved it. It just shows you over time you do forget stuff, because I was literally watching it like I'd never seen it before. I was like, what's going to happen next? Oh my God.
That's great.
That's terrible danger. So I love that one. I also loved, I had a good run in a later season. I think I did 2 or 3 back-to-back that I just loved all the scripts. All the scripts in Teen Wolf were fantastic, but particularly I did an episode set in World War II called
The Fox and the Wolf.
Called that, yes. And then there was another one right after that called Echo House. And I loved that episode as well. This just, it was a gift for me as a director to do a show like this, because Jeff is such a fantastic writer, and you just got such interesting episodes to shoot. Just every episode had fabulous scenes to shoot, things that you don't normally get to do. You have comedy, and you have romance, and you have action, and you have suspense, horror. And he would always say to me, like, what's the unexpected thing? He was always trying to make sure that he didn't get predictable or boring with it. And he never did, obviously. And he couldn't, never. Even if he tried. So I love those 2 episodes in particular, though. I really enjoyed making.
Well, going off of what you just said, I feel like Teen Wolf was definitely a show for everyone. It had romance, drama, action, horror. What was your approach in directing comedic scenes versus very emotional scenes versus action scenes?
One thing I do is I steal from other really talented, good people. So if I was going to do a chase sequence, I would watch movies that had chase sequences that I remembered loving, and I would really watch them over and over, and figure out how they had shot them, how they had cut them, and what made them so appealing and successful to me. So whether it was a comedy or romance or anything, I always would look to other people's shows just to see if there's something to steal from them. And Jeff also is a sort of a cinema buff, and it just has an encyclopedic knowledge of films. He would always, I would have to go away and like really think about it and research. He would just we'd be chatting, it'd be 3 a.m, and he would just be able to spit out all these Japanese movies or European movies that he had seen 20 years before that he remembered in exact detail. And he said, remember that scene in that Kurosawa film when the guy comes in and he would just remember everything about it. And I'll be like, I think I saw that, but I'd have no recollection of what happened. I don't even know if that scene's in that film. So, we would chat about that. And that's it. That was another great thing. But having a showrunner and the writer who was very cinematic in their writing really helped me as a director shoot it, because they'd already put a lot of thought into the blocking of the scenes and how it could be shot and what would make it cool and everything. So that was a big part in making everything successful.
Jeff was really good. I mean, he is very knowledgeable about storytelling in general, but he very much wanted to always make sure that the scripts we wrote were that when the director or the DP or anyone read them, they got what he wanted to accomplish with a certain scene or the sequence.
Yeah, they were very visual. They were like novels, and he was so particular. He's the only writer I've ever known who, after we've shot the episode, will go back and put corrections in the script.
That's true.
Just so that it doesn't bug him in years to come when he looks back and think, I changed that line on set, but I didn't change it in the script. So the scripts for Teen Wolf are little novels, for each episode, and they if anybody wants to learn about script writing, they should read those scripts. If they're, I don't know how you get them, but they should read those, because they would be very insightful in how a well-crafted episode is written.
Absolutely.
Very impressive guy, Jeff is.
So you mentioned watching other things, other movies, other TV shows to get inspiration for an episode. Do you remember anything that you drew inspiration from for Night School in particular?
Golly. Okay, yes. So I love David Fincher's movies, right? So there's a sequence in, he did, Alien 3?
He did.
And I think I'm one of 7 people that saw that film. But there's a sequence in that where the alien creature is running along a tunnel, a tube of some kind, and chasing somebody, about to do terrible things to them. And it ran up the wall.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. When we rewatched this, Will literally started talking about that scene when we were watching Night School.
He started talking about Alien.
Really? Why? What aspect to it?
Well, the shot where the Alpha is chasing them down the corridor, it feels like that shot where the alien is chasing and then goes up along the wall and down back again. And I was actually lamenting that I wish we had the Alpha do that. It would have been very cool, but it just felt like that shot from Alien when he's chasing them into the trap. Where they're trying to lead him into it, and he does all the stuff. And I was like, that's what this is. This is our version of that moment. So
yes, it is. And we did actually. There is a version of it where it did go up on the ceiling.
Oh, that's so cool!
What?
That's so awesome.
There's a tunnel in that school. So there's actually only a hallway in that school. There's only 2 hallways in that place, and one's got lots of windows on the side. And you will have seen. There's a scene where Tyler and Stiles and Scott are walking down that hallway talking, and it's a very low angle because I didn't want to see out of those windows. I always like low angles, cool. But I didn't want to see out the windows because it was snow on the ground. It was supposed to be summer. And then the other hallway is this really long hallway. And because I wanted to do that thing from Alien, it was actually 2 hallways that met, and there was a wall, and it wasn't our school, but we cut a big hole in that wall and made a really long tunnel because I just wanted to go on forever. And I also wanted to be able to drive a vehicle down it, chasing the kids, which is what we did. And we put it was like a very small pickup truck. And we put on the back of it the Steadicam operator who had built these extra long skids that balanced the Steadicam so that he could swing it up in the air and up onto the ceiling.
That's awesome.
For the creature coming at it. And so that's what so in the final version of it, it doesn't quite do that. It goes like up the sides of the walls, but it never went on the ceiling. And I think it was because we when we were talking about in post the creature going up on the ceiling and everything, we're like, it's so big. How is it not like falling down? If it would have been a real tunnel, then it would have been solid. But this is just like ceiling tiles. It's not a very strong thing. So how is that creature not just going to fall on its back and look a little silly, like an upside down turtle, So that was my lofty ambition, was to rip off David Fincher. No, that's actually not rip off, to honor David Fincher.
There it is.
There you go.
They call it homage.
That's homage. There you go. So that's the background of that.
Homage is theft when you're fancy, basically, right?
Exactly. Fancy.
Yeah.
Tim, how would you compare working on the shows like NCIS New Orleans and Salem to Teen Wolf?
How do I compare it? So obviously every show is different, and every show has its own aesthetic and its own audience, and you learn something from everything you do because you work with different people and everything. So, those shows and other shows I've done, but Teen Wolf has a special place in my heart. And if the question is, how is it different to film it? Is that what you asked? Or is
what's the, is the process on other shows radically different from Teen Wolf, or was, because those shows have more money than Teen Wolf had, especially something like NCIS, New Orleans. My God.
Yeah, sure. The thing that made Teen Wolf great, or one of the many things that made Teen Wolf great, was that our goals and sort of standards for ourselves were very high, even though our budget, was very low. You mentioned that it's tiny. But because we all loved it, the scripts were great. We loved the cast and the characters that Jeff created. It wasn't just one person's passion project. It wasn't just like, a director or a writer that had always wanted to do this thing and everybody else was just working on it. It became everybody's passion project. Everybody was really invested in that show. And it meant a lot to those of us making it. I really was proud of everything we did and that we were able to make it so cinematic and visually much more stylish and much more. It looked like a much bigger budget show than it had any right to look like, but it also meant a lot to the people that watched it. I know you've all seen it, but every now and again, when you're working on a show, you are just like, oh, this is cool, this is fun, I'm really excited to shoot this, and you just sort of enjoy the process. But I started meeting people that watched the show. They would be tours that would come around the stages sometimes. And so you'd sort of meet people and you'd see their reactions and how important the show was to them. And obviously they meet the cast and they're the people that they really connected with. And it sort of dawned on me how important this show was, because it dealt with a lot of issues. On one level, it's just it's a silly little MTV show about werewolves, but it dealt with a lot of issues for kids, adolescents who were watching it, and helped them a lot. A lot of people would come up to me, and I'm just the director behind the scenes. They don't see me on the show. They don't have any connection with me, but they would just tell me, and they would get emotional and cry and tell me how important it was and how it had helped them with something, or they had faced something that one of the characters, represented in the show or something. And even years later, like I did another show after Teen Wolf ended in Toronto, and J.R. Bourne was on it with me. So, J.R. and I, we had lunch one day, and we were walking around Toronto, and this like horde of French kids like surrounded him, and I'm just laughing at him, like, well, he's just sort of like uncomfortably in the middle of it all. And they were so overwhelmed to see somebody from Teen Wolf, because it meant so much to them. And they were speaking French, they couldn't speak English, and I don't speak French very well, but they were just bawling, and you just knew that it meant so much to them. And I don't even know if they'd watched it when it was first aired, and they were young, so they may have watched it on Amazon or Netflix or wherever and seen it much later. But there's it come from that. I took it more seriously once I started seeing these sort of reactions. I always took it seriously, but I realized that it meant a lot to people. So I sort of felt that responsibility in my own little part of it, to make sure that we never let anybody down.
Yeah. Since we've started our Instagram page, we've had a lot of people reach out to us with very emotional stories about Teen Wolf, and the big consensus is that everyone wants more. I was surprised by how many new fans there were, like 13, 14-year-old kids.
Yeah.
Do you think that there was ever a revival or spinoff? Would you want to be part of the Teen Wolf world? Would you want to return to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of me thinks that, I'm a middle-aged guy, should I be the guy doing it? But I love doing it. So sure, yes, I want to do it again. The net, MTV, they were talking about spin-offs and reboot. Actually, no, they were talking about rebooting it when we hadn't even finished shooting season 6.
Crazy.
So I'm very sure that there will be a reboot of Teen Wolf in the future at some point.
How could there not
Fans will be very excited to hear that.
Yes, absolutely.
Some of the episodes that you directed had a lot of action in them. What was it like working with the stunt doubles and fight choreographers of Teen Wolf?
Well, we were very lucky because we got 2 of the best sort of stunt coordinators in the industry, Gary Stearns and Bryson Counts, and they were friends, and they do big Marvel movies, King Kong and any big action movie, Disney movies that people see. So they did not normally do television, and I can't even remember I interviewed Gary on the phone pre-Zoom days, and I was laughing as I looked at his resume because it was just one massive movie after another, and I had never met him, but I immediately just assumed I could joke with him. So I was joking that I don't know if your resume is quite good enough.
Oh no!
For micro budget MTV show. I mean, you've only done Thor and the Avengers and stuff like that. Were they difficult? I don't know if I've seen those. It was just ridiculous that we were even talking to him. But he had young kids at the time, so this gave him a job that he could do and stay, in California and not have to be traveling, all over the world with those films. So I think it just was the right time for him. And Bryson, who is a great friend of his, likewise does all these big movies. And the only way that they could, it's hard for them to turn down a big movie. So we would be shooting a season, and one of them would say, look, I'm going to go off for 3 weeks to Australia or Hawaii or wherever, but the other one will cover me. So it was great for us because we got top level people, and they could sort of fill it in, and they stuck with the show because again they loved it. They could have made a lot more money doing other things, but they really loved the show and the people. We got very lucky.
Indeed, we were very lucky. What was your process for approaching each episode of Teen Wolf when you were given a new script that you'd end up directing?
The great thing that we had was that Jeff was on set with us. Sometimes you do a show and you're filming it, in New Mexico or Vancouver or somewhere, and the writers are in LA and they don't see the locations of the sets, and so it's sometimes trickier to take a scene or a script and sort of make it work where you are with the locations you have. And I blocking it when I'm figuring out a scene. I have to figure out the blocking, where the actor's going to be. Like in the script, that they've got to walk in a door and immediately see out of a window that the bad guy is stealing their car. You have to have a set that allows you to do that. The great thing with Jeff is that he would be there, so we would walk around the sets and the locations. And he's such a perfectionist. He would recite. We'd read the dialogue. We'd play the different parts, and if it was supposed to be a walk and talk down a hallway that had to end at a certain line at a door, we would act it out. We'd meet over the weekends and walk it all through and everything. And so it all fitted very, very well because it was all constructed, knowing the locations and the sets and what would work better. So we didn't have to sort of retrofit a script into places that didn't work very well for them. So we would do that, and you'd obviously do casting and so forth, and any additional parts that you need for that episode. And then I would always shot list to make sure you had a shot list and a storyboard, because the other thing about Teen Wolf is that you did not waste any time. So you got to make sure that you know exactly what you need, so that there's no standing around on set just trying to figure it out. A lot of shows, would do an action sequence or answer any sequence, and it was a big day if they had 30 or 40 setups, camera setups in a day. On Teen Wolf, we topped 100 regularly because we just had to be really organized and had to work at that pace. And I enjoyed it. I think everybody did, actually, because we would just work at a really fast clip all day long. So nobody got bored because it was moving on to the next thing. And that was how we were able to, produce a good looking episode in 7 days, which was better than many shows who would shoot for 9 or 10 days.
That's very true. We were a very good looking show for such a short amount of time to be able to film, because you look at some other shows that have, it feels like a leisurely schedule. That's like, oh, you have 10 days. My God, you have 3 more days or 4 more days. And then it's like, well, we have 7 days to shoot an entire movie's worth of content that's going to be 42 minutes of an episode. But you're right. Everyone moved very, very fast. And there was never a time when we would walk on a set and be like, people just kind of looking around and trying to figure out what they were going to shoot. There was always a list, and JD was cracking the whip, and Dave Daniels got his guys are already pre-lighting the next day or the next set. And it's like, we're just waiting to move on, and we're turning the cameras around and getting ready to shoot. And no one has time to go to their trailers because we're about to roll. And it was fantastic. We moved so fast.
We tried to make the trailers as unattractive as possible so that nobody wanted to go to their trailers.
Right, exactly.
You mentioned, I think it's Wolfsbane. You like the beginning of Wolfsbane, I think you told me.
Yeah, I love that teaser.
That episode, that opening sequence, the chase, that is the one with the chase, right? Where the car chase and into the Iron Box and all that. Right. So that one has the record. That we did, we shot that in one night when I think we had like 118 setups in that one night. And that's the Teen Wolf record.
My gosh.
And also with that, we were talking about stunts. The other great thing was we had these young actors that were very athletic. And Tyler Hoechlin, I don't know if you know, but he could have been like a pro baseball player. He was a very, very athletic guy. And in that scene, you'll see him. He's running in front of these cars, these police cars that are chasing him, and that's actually him. There was never a double. It's entirely him. And in my mind, the two sides of my brain are going, this looks fantastic because I can see it's him, and it looks like we're going really fast and there's a lot of peril and danger. And then the other side of my brain was like, oh my God, it really is him. And there is a lot of peril and danger. Really how can we do this? But anyway, we did it and he was great. And there's a moment where he slides.
I remember that bit. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was his suggestion. I was like, oh my, because that's like a baseball thing, when you're sliding into
one of the bases,
slide into. And bases.
And sports. We all know sports.
Okay. And he did that. I was like, he talked about it. He was like, I could slide here. I was like, that's going to look great. And the director in me is saying, absolutely. The producer side of me is saying, you're insane because there's 3 cars coming at you at speed. One of them's driven by Lyndon, another actor. I had no idea if Lyndon was a good driver or not. And then that was the Teen Wolf. We did it and it looked great. And the other funny thing with those sort of sequences in those early days when we were in Atlanta is that we didn't have any picture cars. Normally you rent cars from a company that knows what you're going to do with them and that they're okay if you destroy their vehicles. So with the early days in Atlanta, we didn't have that. We were getting them from like Enterprise or some rental company. And then we'd use them in these action sequences. And one of them, I remember Kate, right? She had a little green Kia Soul vehicle, and she had to shoot a shotgun up through the ceiling, and there was a werewolf on the top. I can't remember who it was. And so she shoots the shotgun, and it set fire to the ceiling of the car.
Oh God!
We're like, oh, I think it's fine. Just get a wet towel and put it out. And then the black car, that Derek's car, when he gets shot at by by Argent in Wolfsbane, in this episode we're talking about. They're shooting. We really had people shooting at that car with, I don't know whether it was, I guess it's pellets or something like that, but that's the real actors there. And they were shooting pellets all over this thing. And again, I was just like, oh my God, what are we doing? It looked great. But that car, when we handed it back, I don't know if we can air this thing, actually, because I don't want to. I was maybe really upset. Oh, too late now. But anyway,
It's probably past the statute of limitations, right?
Exactly.
Yes. So the car would go. We sent it back, and it looked like somebody had taken a hammer to it and had just put a million dents in that vehicle. And we're like, but we took out their insurance. So this is okay.
Well, there you go. As long as you sign for that insurance, it doesn't matter how you bring it back, as long as the tank is full. So, that's
right.
all that matters.
That's just courtesy.
That is courtesy.
And as we've discussed, politeness is very important to werewolves. So
politeness is very important. Speaking of shooting all the great action sequences for Teen Wolf from, both in Atlanta and in Los Angeles, did you prefer block shooting to shooting single episodes at a time?
I'm not sure that's a very smooth segue, Will.
No, I said mediocre. I said I was up front the whole time.
Right. Okay. So I now I've forgotten what the question was. So block shooting and all that stuff. Right.
Yeah.
So we did block shooting is more efficient. So when you shoot, we used to shoot 3 episodes at a time. So like I would, Russell and I alternated. So the great Russell Mulcahy, who I was a huge fan of, by the way, I was very excited to meet him because I was a fan of his. So he would direct 3 episodes, and then I would direct 3 episodes, and we'd flip block. So that was block shooting. And the advantage is not a very noble advantage. The advantage, well, I suppose it's noble. It saves money. So, on our little budget, it was very efficient to do that because we would take all the school scenes from those 3 episodes, go to the school and shoot them all. And then we didn't have to waste time and money moving the company, moving all the trucks and everything back and forth. Literally the gas money to move all those trucks was worth it. Saving that money was worth it. So the benefit to me, I did prefer that because what that gives you is actually like more time. Because the time you waste moving, if on a day you're filming and then you at lunchtime have to move somewhere else, that's filming time that you lose. So by doing it this way, I would get a lot more time. And if I'm shooting a scene in the school and I think about it the next day and I feel like, I really should have got that extra shot or something else, or I should redo something that I wasn't happy with it. I've got the luxury of being able to do that because I'm still there.
Right.
So it was very helpful to perfect the episodes, for Russell and for myself. It's tough on the writers because you have to have all the scripts done in advance.
Yeah.
And, so it's, you often get into the situation on shows where, you're running, the production's caught up with the scripts, the scripts, you're shooting an episode and a new one starts on Monday and you don't have the script for that one yet. I'm not saying that ever happened on Teen Wolf, but it does happen on lesser shows.
Not once on Teen Wolf.
So anyway, block shooting would be my favorite.
No, we knew about all that because sometimes Will would be like, "Hey, you guys, I can't hang out this weekend because we have to finish the script in like 2 days." So
and it made him stronger. Thank you.
I am a much stronger person because of that. No, there was a time in, I think it was season 5, where we worked 21 days straight. The writers did, because we had, I think, it was either a completed outline or we were right on the cusp of completing an outline and then had to change everything. I don't remember what the reason was, but we had to throw it out and start over. And it really sucked because we, again, worked 3 weeks without a day off, just straight all the way through. And I remember this was maybe during the summertime at some point, and this was back when we were at 8500 Balboa, Tim, at our first campus up in the valley, and the AC would not be turned on for the writer's room over the weekends. And so it would just be baking in there. Yes, saving money. So what we did is we would just get all these folding tables from the lunchroom and take them into the post-production area because the ACs were always on there to keep the computers and the servers going and all that. So we would have to just pile in there and set up all these folding tables and into a giant square and sit in there and work. And we managed. But hey, we got the outline done and the script finished, and I'm sure Joe Janier wasn't too upset with us.
Teen Wolf wasn't a job. Teen Wolf was a lifestyle.
Absolutely, it was.
Yep.
And it was fantastic.
There was no such thing as a day off. And there was always this friendly rivalry between the writers' room and the production, because everybody felt that they had the harder time of it. So I would sometimes, walk in and I'd find Jeff like on the ground, sprawled out like a dead body on the carpet, right? And
I have pictures of that. of that. So yeah.
And he would and then in a humorous fashion, he would just be moaning and just saying how he can't possibly write another word. And that MTV doesn't deserve another script out of him, and all. It was just very funny. He was moaning like that. And then Joe or I, or both sometimes, because we both found it very funny, would just kneel down next to him and say, "Are you done? Because pages for Monday, so you need to get back up and get in front of your standing desk and that really big screen and bang out some pages, okay?" Yeah. And it was all very. We enjoyed those moments. It was funny. He would just roll over and say, "You bastards!"
It's true. It's true. No, he had that standing desk, and he just rolled it. Like he'd roll it out onto stage, and he'd be working. If somebody needed him, he'd roll it into the weight room where he'd be working out. And there were plenty of times where he'd be working out. It's like, "Will, we're going to the weight room." It's like, okay, so I'd get the desk, just push it in, and sit there and type while he's doing bench presses like some Greek god or something, and he's calling out dialogue. He's like, and then Scott says, "Oh!" And I'm like, he screams like, no, that was just me. So that was it. There was no off time, and you're right, it was a lifestyle, but it was so worth it. Worth it.
It's great. I mean, he was able to generate all those scripts, even though he was exhausted, and it was a monumental workload. Again, it was the only show where I think we got greenlit for one season. I can't remember where it was, and early on in the days, season 2 or 3, and they. I think we had got MTV to agree that we were going to have a hiatus. We are going to have like some months off, right? Everybody's very excited about 3 months off. I think we were going to have, and then he got the call, and I think Joe and I were there when he got this call, and they were like, "Hey, that 3 month off thing? So we're not going to do that. We're going to do like 3 days. How about that? Just, relax, kick back, do what you want, go anywhere." And then we start up in 3 days. And so Joe and I were like, "Oh my God, Jeff might actually explode. Like we may actually witness spontaneous combustion," because he was so he was going to go to Greece. He was going to go on holiday.
I remember. Yeah.
And we're like, "No, none of that's going to happen. You're just going to, it's just like a long weekend. You're just going to take off Monday and then start writing the new season."
Oh, wow.
It was rough.
That's crazy.
It was rough because I do remember being in the writer's room when we're all kind of like winding down. It's like we're in the home stretch. It's like you see the finish line and everyone's like, "Oh, we're going to do this and that." And then Jeff just kind of shuffles in and something's wrong. He's like, "So we're just working. We're just, season 4, they want it next week." And it's like, "But we haven't finished 3B yet." He's like, "Doesn't matter. Just, we're doing it." It's like, okay.
Bad news bears.
Bad news bears, bad news writers, but bad news production and crew and everybody. So yeah.
It was a good problem because it meant that it was so successful that they just wanted it more and more. And I read a thing, at that time, they think this Variety or Hollywood Reporter, one of the trades, had on the front cover. They said that MGM, which owned the rights to the Teen Wolf title, MGM which had been struggling for many years, suddenly was back in business, all thanks to James Bond and Teen Wolf.
Teen Wolf. I remember that. I remember that.
So it saved MGM, so it was really super successful for everybody involved.
No, it was great. We all got to work on it for a long time. It was wonderful. Employment is amazing. So yeah.
That's kind of crazy for it to be, mentioned in the same headline as something like James Bond, which is, one of the most profitable IPs of all time. And then it's like, and this MTV show that was adapted from an 80s teen movie that like half the audience either hasn't seen or doesn't like.
Yes.
Those two things, both of those things. That's crazy.
Rarefied air.
And Scott and Stiles are definitely two of the funniest characters on the show. We were curious about how much like improv happened with them. And as a director, how do you feel about improv?
I am not a huge fan of improv. So on the whole, it's something I prefer actors not to do, because I always feel like the writer, and Jeff is a great writer, so I always feel like they've written the funnier lines because they've sat down and really honed it and thought it through and pared it down until until it really works. Often it's less funny if people add to it, or the scene doesn't end, just sort of just drifts on and there's no solid punchline, or they're not thinking about it in terms of the end of one scene has to set up what happens immediately in the beginning of the next scene. So there's that. Dylan, though, is really funny, and there were a lot of times there were things that he would say that would end up in the show. You always do this, you always sort of ask actors to do it as scripted, and then like, okay, do one where you're ad-libbing or whatever. And Dylan, was really able to spit out lines. I mean, he was, I think he even talked to Jeff about writing an episode. There was conversations about him because he's such a talented person, and I think he would easily write something great in the future himself, and I think we talked about him writing on Teen Wolf at some point. Orny came from the background of being a stand-up comic, so he was great and he was perfect in that role. Jeff had seen him in a comedy club and just saw him as the coach from that. So he was great in it, but he didn't initially. Obviously, he got up to speed pretty quickly, but initially, he had no idea about doing takes the same way each time. He's an editor's nightmare because we would light for him to be at the front of the classroom and he's going to say his lines there. And then take two, he walks to the back of the classroom and sits down in a chair. And I'm like, well, oh my God, you're not even on camera at this point. So there was a little bit of a learning curve there, but he was great in the role. On those two, I probably would give a little slack for ad-libbing. But on the whole, not my favorite thing. And for instance, me right now, I would be a lot more entertaining and funnier if I was scripted and if Jeff had written.
No, this is wonderful.
This is great.
Do you have any fun memories from season 1 that you'd like to share?
Fun memory. Well, it's many, because it was just, I said earlier on, it was great. It was like going away on camp with all these people and everybody just really bonded. My kids were with me a lot, all the time. So they grew up on that set. And so Dylan and Tyler were, they were like 4 or 5 years older than my kids, and they were like their older brothers. They would all hang out together, and like Dylan and Tyler. We had an episode where they were on an ice rink, and Dylan and Tyler taught my kids to ice skate, and they played lacrosse together. And my youngest daughter at the time would just treat them like they were her servants or her. Would just send them off. Like she would hurl. They had one. I think she told me this. I was asking her about this the other day. She said, Dylan said, let's play lacrosse. And then she was like, we only have one lacrosse stick, Dylan. And she was like, these boys, they're not so smart. How are we going to play? And so the game they evolved was that she would just basically hurl the ball, and Dylan and Tyler, as dogs, would go and search for it in the bush. Get back. So like they occupied them. They kept themselves, entertained on the shoot days. But I do remember that another thing, they taught them ice skating, but they also taught them bad language. And on the actors are wired, and then between takes, normally you're wearing headphones, and normally they get turned down so you don't hear what they're saying. My kids are on set with me, and they're sitting at the video village, and they're watching the cameras get set up, and they're wearing headsets, so they're hearing everything. And many times I would hear Dylan and Tyler say something or laugh or joke or say, use some bad language, and I would look at them, and then they would immediately look at me and like busted, and they were like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, Tim, I'm so sorry, because my kids are now laughing and they've now learned a new word. So I thank, if Dylan and Tyler ever watch this, I thank you both very much for teaching my daughters how to swear.
Teen Wolf pays off in many unexpected ways.
You talked about some very iconic scenes that you shot in the first season. Which one is your favorite?
My favorite scene of the first season, gosh, so many. I'd have to review it all, but the ones that I remember I really enjoyed were very unusual. I enjoyed that action sequence. I always loved doing action. So that thing that we did with Tyler being chased and being shot at and all that stuff, that was a great fun night. But the things that I think were the really interesting that we got to shoot on Teen Wolf that you never get to shoot on other shows were sort of the weird, mentally confusing sort of scenes. Like there's a scene there in one of the episodes there with Colton on a doctor's bench, and and it's Tyler's dad as playing the doctor, right? So he's pulling this vine or something out of his neck. I remember doing that. And he's screaming, and he's got a strap on his chin, I think, and there's all this sort of flowers and blood. I remember like pouring blood all over these flowers on the ground and everything. And so those were really, they're weird and they're funny, fun to do. And it's always the thing in shows that the scary scenes or the horror scenes, which hopefully make somebody watching the show just like, not take their eyes off it or take their eyes away because they can't watch because it's scary or whatever. When you're doing them, they're actually the sort of the funny scenes to do. Everybody's laughing, because it's, it's in real life, it seems ridiculous. But those were great fun. And I remember doing lots of scenes with Colton. Actually, Colton always got tortured a lot. I seem to remember quite a few times. I remember getting a snake or something out of his mouth. He had to cough up a snake, I think.
He had a snake come out of his eye socket.
And
his eyeball goes like that. It looks fit. I'm a big horror movie freak, and I love that scene.
It's a great scene.
You see, that shows you what a good actor he is, that he could act a snake out of his eye.
Yep.
And, we didn't have much money for CG, so a lot of it was practical.
It looks awesome.
So, Tim, as I've said earlier in this interview, I think Night School is my favorite episode of season 1. Was it difficult finding ways to keep the story in the episode propulsive despite essentially being stranded with these characters in one location?
That was a great script. So I don't think I ever had any fears about that, just because it's like a ticking time bomb. It's relentless. It's like the shark in Jaws. They're only on a little boat, and they wanted a bigger boat, but they couldn't have one. And it's you don't ever question yourself. Like, I wish they'd had maybe a jet ski just to mix it up. You don't care about that because you got great characters that you do care about. The actors are great, the characters are really fun, and you're all invested in those guys. So I don't think I worried about that, because it just, in the script, it was just there was no boring scene. There was no dull moment where nothing was happening. I think I had concerns perhaps about the geography of the school and just making sure that it all made sense to anybody watching. And I think when you're directing something, you possibly think about that stuff more than it really matters, because I don't think people watching really care too much about that. They're just watching the scenes. But I was a bit worried, because even though it was a big school, it was an abandoned school, a closed down school, which my children told me afterwards that they were actually terrified of when we were there. And I made them go there often. It was because it was a big abandoned school, but we only could shoot certain sections. So there's, like I mentioned earlier, there's only these 2 hallways. And so you see the one hallway over and over again, but I thought it just looked so great that it didn't bother me. It just looks eerie, and because we'd made it extra long, we just had these sort of lights coming in from certain doorways and stuff. It just looked spooky. And it was one of those situations where I'd walked through every scene with Jeff, and he's, so helpful with how he had imagined scenes playing out. And we were like, oh, we could do this here. And then he would, if he liked an idea or a piece of that school or as a location, he would adjust the script to work, for that and everything. To answer your question, I didn't worry about it being the nature of the story being, propulsive or being engaging, just because the script was just so strong.
Do you like the challenge of filming a more bottle episode that's one spot, or do you like the variety of going to different locations when shooting an episode?
Well, it's just variety, and that's a great thing you had with Teen Wolf. You didn't ever have to do the same thing over and over again. And even, because it has all these great elements. You got horror and comedy because they go hand in hand, and you've got romance, and you've got drama and action, suspense. So you had all these things all the time in different mixes of them in every episode. Often what happens when you're shooting is you're on location, and you're initially excited because the place looks great, and then you realize, oh, it's going to look really great at night, which means I'm not going to get any sleep. because I'm going to be filming all night. And then after a few nights of it, you're like, oh my God, get me back to the stage. So then you go back to the stage and you're like, oh, thank God, you're safe. Like it doesn't matter if it rains. I actually did on our stages because we had stages where we had tin roofs, which we didn't realize would be really loud when it rained. It was, you just had this great variety all the time with that show, which you don't get necessarily on other shows.
Night School takes place entirely at night. It's the name and everything. Was it hard to shoot an episode that's like dark the entire time, like visually dark? We
realized early on that werewolves do not look great in the daylight. So you quickly adjust to Teen Wolf being a nocturnal show, and we all have to become nocturnal. So you're just working nights. I remember doing 3 weeks of nights in the woods in Atlanta. And it had snowed, so the ground's really cold and icy and uncomfortable and just stand on after 12 hours. But ultimately, it just looks better. So you just you wouldn't do it if you weren't enthusiastic about the end result. And I would always as a human being, I'll be like, maybe I'd prefer to be in bed or I'd prefer to be filming on somewhere. But when you're in the film industry, you look at the monitors and you think that looks spectacular. We made it harder on ourselves. I was always, people would groan in production meetings because we'd read scenes and stuff, and I'd be like, and it's raining. You'd be like, oh God, do we have? I'd be like, get it out now, because yes, we are going to do it because it will just be cool. So, even though we're in California, Beacon Hills has got its own microclimate, and it was always up and it always rained. And even our daylight, we made daylight. We were like, this is like daylight in Norway, somewhere where they have a very low sun, and we never had, it was never a bright, sunny school. It was always, even at noon, dark and creepy.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for all the rain suggestions because I love the Teen Wolf rain scenes. They're always so
beautiful.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tim, for our listeners who don't know, what is the rehearsal process like on a typical episode of Teen Wolf?
Very, very quick, because again, that was stuff that we didn't want to. You do some shows and everybody's at a more leisurely pace, and you've got time to really work it out. But I would always have a plan, and it might change, but I would always have a plan of like where I wanted the actors to be, and when people are moving, on what lines, and all this sort of stuff. And we didn't spend too much time diverging from that, just because we needed to get shooting. You got a successful shooting day is all like about momentum. You got to get going quickly. Right. And keep going. So if we say, for instance, had a guest actor in that wasn't familiar with the show, then after we blocked it, I might take the actors off set so the crew can still work, light it and set the cameras up and everything, and have people run that scene, so they get familiar with it. Mm-hmm. If it was action stuff, ideally we would rehearse, the day before or days before with the stunt coordinators, so that the fight is all figured out, and then the stunt coordinators film it, on an iPad or their phone or whatever, and show me the fight, and then we would talk about it and say, okay, so let's add another few punches here, or take out a kick here, or say that we'll insert a line here, so they have to like stop for a second, because we always wanted, again, the fights. We would always, I think they were better on Teen Wolf than on some shows, because we would always want to have them be representative of the character. So like, this character doesn't suddenly know jiu-jitsu or something. Like, this character has never had any formal training, so they're going to be scrappy when they fight. And this other person that they're fighting, is part leopard, so they're going to have certain skills that other people would not have. So and again, Jeff with the writing, dialogue would happen during a fight scene, so it's not just punch, 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 punch until we're bored of it, and then talk again. It was sort of all integrated. So that stuff needed more rehearsal time, because that's choreography. You have to learn the choreography.
You've kind of told us your approach to how you start leading up to directing an episode. What was like a typical day like once you've started directing? So
you arrive at 6 p.m. when the sun's going down, and everybody says good morning to you, because in our world, it's morning. And you get served breakfast by Laurent at the catering truck.
Yes.
So you're eating, your meals are all out of whack with the rest of the world. And then you look at the special effects makeup stuff and you're like, more blood. It needs more blood. Everything needs more blood. You just add more blood to everything. Then you test the rain towers because it's always raining, like I said. So there would be, they'd test those and more. Heavier rain, and we'd order more water trucks. I think we went through one night like 9 water trucks.
Oh my God!
Wow.
Because we had to. It was on a later episode. It was a scene on a lacrosse field. There were horses and all sorts of stuff going on. It was just torrential. That field was a mud pit by the end of it. So you test the water things, make sure they're working well. Then you start shooting some massive complicated action sequence that on any other show would be 2 or 3 days worth of filming, and we're going to do it by lunch. And then lunch rolls around at midnight, and suddenly you've got 6 hours left of shooting, and the sun's coming up and you're scrambling like mad. So you abandon all your previous plans and just shoot as much as you can, as quickly as you can. And then even when the sun is coming up, I'm screaming at everybody that we can still keep filming because if we look down, we can't tell that the sky is blue. And then you would go home, you'd scrape ice off your car because it was freezing, and go home, collapse, get up again and do it all over again every night for 6 years.
Well,
what a job.
It came out beautiful, so.
Well, you know what, though? And I loved every minute of it. And I'm obviously making a joke about it, but, everybody did. It was fantastic.
Well, we're still talking about it 10 years later. So
yes, we are.
And we get many messages every day being like, could you please tell MTV that we would like a season 7?
Just call up MTV. Tell them more, please.
Yeah, hey, MTV, it's us.
Yes.
So in addition to directing, you were an executive producer on Teen Wolf. What did that entail?
That meant I got a better parking spot, and basically meant that you are there all the time. So even if I'm not directing an episode, I'd still be there. And you're either working on future episodes or basically helping out the showrunner, Jeff, in this case, so you're helping him make sure that while he's busy writing, that the rest of the show is happening and being shot the way he would like, that locations we're picking are things that he would like, that sets we're building are in the vein of the rest of the show. Because sometimes you get new people in and they're not as familiar with the show. So it's, you're just trying to be his eyes and ears while he's not around.
So you wore a lot of hats.
Yes, I guess. But it was, again, it's all good because the more involved you are, the more invested you are. And I do think the shows that I like when you watch them often just have a small group of people that are passionate about that project. And they all work on it all the time, and they're friends, and they all get along and work together, and that's what Teen Wolf was. We all loved it and wanted it to be as great as it could be, but it wasn't a huge production by any means. There really was just a small group of people, a small crew, really, but we were very efficient.
Tim, you and Russell were supervising directors on the show. What was it like with the two of you working together, and then with our guest directors, to keep a visual continuity between the episodes without the show getting stale?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, Russell Mulcahy is one of my heroes. He's fantastic, right? I'd admired his movies and his music videos. He was the king of the music videos. He made all these iconic music videos that are still shown today when MTV started out. And he worked with Duran Duran and Elton John and Rod Stewart. Any big name group at the time. And when I've looked back on that or reflected on that now, and I realized that, he was always trying to make sure that every video he made was spectacular, but different from the last one. He didn't want to get stale. And he brought that to Teen Wolf as well, I think, because, we never set ourselves in stone like, oh, we always do transitions like this, or we always do, some flashback like this. We never locked ourselves into that, so that, season 1 and season 6 were different. They looked stylistically different. And for me, you just get more confident, or you get more familiar with certain things, and you like certain things, your tastes change, or you see, again, I'd see some other show, I'd see a movie, and I'd be like, oh my God, now I feel like everything I did, a few years ago is he's old fashioned, and that's sort of a cutting edge approach, and so we were both like that. And for me, I'd watch his episodes and I would be like, oh, that's so much better than anything I've ever done. I've got to improve my performance, my game. I've got to compete and match, or try to match, what he's done. So it was a good rivalry is not necessarily the right word, but it was a good sort of inspiration for me anyway, because it's that thing people talk about where if you play tennis with somebody, you want to play tennis with somebody that's better than you, and you get better yourself. It sort of like challenges you to try harder. So I loved working with him as sort of like my teammate on the show. And there were times we really were literally back to back. And there were a few scenes where there was one scene I remember, I think, this is season 1. So like there's the bus sequence, right? With the alpha and everything. And we had two buses. Yeah. So we had 2 buses literally right next to each other so that we could light both of them with the same lights. And he's shooting, scenes in his, and I'm doing bits and pieces. And the other bus we had one that was like cut in half so you could sort of see under the chairs. But I remember dragging people, like from one end of the bus to the other one. I'm sure they enjoyed it immensely.
Yes, so much fun.
I'm sure we took all the bolts and all the rough bits out of the bottom of that bus. But anyway, so it was great, for me to have admired somebody as a filmmaker, him, and then get to actually work with him. And we would laugh, and it was just fantastic, doing that. And there was I don't know what episode it was or what we were doing, but there was some moment where I was filming some scene and there was a black cloth, like a curtain behind me. And on the other side of the curtain, Russell was shooting something else. That was as sophisticated as we could. It was just so that, he could just so we could keep shooting and make the show as quickly as we could. And there was a moment where I bumped into him like back to back through this curtain. And I remember laughing and him laughing on the other side, because we literally were working back to back on the show together as teammates. So Russell's a good friend of mine. I love Russell, and it's one of the many gifts that Teen Wolf gave me was to get the opportunity to work with him.
Just pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Exactly.
Your daughters, Claire and Lily, both played characters on the show starting in season 4. Mm-hmm. And we now know that they taught Tyler Posey and Dylan O'Brien to fetch, so that's exciting. But what was it like working with them?
I loved it, every minute of it. That was a joy that this show gave me, because they've traveled with me all over on different jobs, because you get a job somewhere, New Mexico or Atlanta or New Orleans, wherever it might be. And so they would come with me, and they've grown up on sets. But Teen Wolf was, it sort of hit them at the formative years, the 6 years of Teen Wolf. And so they loved the show and were very familiar with it, and then obviously know all the cast and everything. And we would go to parties every week with the whole cast, screening parties at Jeff's house, and they would come with me. And so they were there, and they would, when we're filming, I'm talking about these night shoots and everything, they're there with me. They're on a nocturnal schedule with me. And they've always been in a professional theater group near where we live, and they were always part of that theater group, even as young children. They were the only kids. It's an adult theater company, but they were the only kids in it. And Jeff came to see them in some of their shows and stuff, and obviously knew them very well from seeing them every day at work. And then he wrote their parts for them as a gift, which was fabulous, because they are good actors and they're filmmakers in their own right now, but they got to be in the show that they had grown up with, and that was lovely for them. They're suddenly now acting with Dylan and Tyler in scenes and so forth, and I'm directing, and it was one of the very special magical moments that I've had in my life, to be able to work with my children on the show that I love, everybody that I loved there. It was really special. You don't get that very often.
We would love to talk to them later if they're interested when we get to season 4.
I said to them today, I said, the only thing because they were like, oh, what are you going to talk about on this? And I was like, I'm really nervous about doing this, because like I said earlier, if Jeff wrote my script, I could. So I said, the only thing I know for a fact that I'm going to say is that I am going to volunteer you two to go on and do a podcast.
Wonderful. Yes, we'd love to talk to them at some point. That'd be fantastic, because
they will be far, far more interesting to me, because they were kids and they remember it all far more clearly than I do. I'm like, really? That happened? And they're like, yes, Dad. Yeah.
I'd really love to hear their perspective, like growing up on set.
Yeah.
And then becoming part of the show.
Yeah.
That'd be
Really
fun.
cool story.
Do you have any new or upcoming projects that you'd like to talk about?
I'm still finishing the last thing I was on, actually, which is NCIS New Orleans. So I'm actually editing that as we speak. So that will be done soon. And as always in the film industry, the future is a complete mystery. I do not know. The only thing I know for certain is that my daughters they're making a horror movie, and I'm hoping they will employ me. So
That's awesome.
please
I'm very excited.
put in a good word for me when you do interview them.
Okay.
Oh yeah,
I think
of
we can do
course.
that. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
You know, like we said, we love horror movies, so very excited for that.
Yeah. And we also try to, like, Calissa has a Twitter account that spotlights female filmmakers. So yeah, we also try to go out of our way to see horror movies made by women. And I think the genre really benefits from a female perspective. So
Well, great. Well, they will be fascinated to talk to you about that, because they have made one movie already that is just coming out actually on Apple and YouTube and other places, and it's called Max and Me, and it's not a horror, not a horror thing. It's like a coming of age. It's a coming of age. It's like Teen Wolf without the werewolves.
So just the teen then.
Just the teen. It's teen. So
We'll check that out too.
Yeah.
yes, we absolutely will. Well, Tim, this has been an amazing opportunity to talk to you. We are very, very grateful that you came on and shared some memories of working on the show that we all love very much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Because I think this is it's going to be fun for the fans of the show, and Teen Wolf deserves to be celebrated. So thank you. I love the show, and I was hugely grateful to be part of it, a little part of it.
I think a little bit bigger part. A little bit bigger part. Yeah, you're a pretty big part. So 35 episodes. I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, a third of the show. So fantastic.
I think that was a good point about Deaton, though, that Scott doesn't bring up when he's trying to repudiate Stiles' theory. He doesn't say, well, Derek said that if he was the alpha that he would have healed while he was unconscious, but he didn't.
That is kind of like a moment where pointing that out kind of shows the seams just a little bit. It very much reminds me of the scene at the end of the season is it Co-Captain, when Kate is asking Chris, can you get turned from a scratch? Well, it depends on how far the claws go. So what about those claw marks? And it's like, guys, those are clearly several days old. They should be healed. Like, you shouldn't even be having this conversation,
right?
Period.
Yeah, it is kind of like, haven't you guys been hunting them for like 200 years?
Yeah.
Y'all don't take very good notes, huh?
I feel like it's just a problem that all supernatural shows have going on, especially the show Supernatural. I mean, we got like 3 seasons in and they'd still be like, oh, that's what happens with demons.
Mm-hmm.
They've been doing that since Sam was a baby. How did they not already know about that?
It is a problem where I think when you establish characters that are supposed to have expertise on something, it really kind of restricts what you're able to do without breaking the continuity. Because eventually, if you want to add mythology, you have to acknowledge that your supposedly expert characters, for some reason, never picked up on this basic knowledge that you've just invented, right?
Yeah, it is kind of the thing where it's like, because, as a show or any story moves forward with like multiple installments, you're going to come up with new information and you have new ideas that contradict what came before. Because it's like, well, you didn't know at the time they were going to be Dread Doctor. That didn't exist in season 1, so that type of thing. I feel like you can have a character who has expertise in something, but they're bad at it. Someone has a lot of knowledge, but they're not great maybe at the execution of using that knowledge, or they're still learning and stuff like that. And I feel like some storytellers are worried that that might make a character seem stupid, for lack of a better word. And I think that ends up putting storytellers in a situation where you get something like that, where it's like, well, they just got this tattoo thing, and shouldn't that have existed their entire, they should know all this over their entire lives. So I feel like maybe sometimes people lean more into just not good writing instead of having a character learning or being wrong.
I think the best thing that you can do is, when you're writing the characters, you create backdoors in the code almost, where, so let's say for Supernatural, it would be like, we have a lot of expertise with supernatural stuff, but demons are the hardest things to study because they're rare. They don't come out and meddle with things very often. So usually we're dealing with ghosts or Wendigos or whatever, but we're not really dealing with demons very often. And there you go. So then you've written something where if you want to add to that particular mythology later, you don't have to break the continuity or make it seem like the characters just aren't intelligent for not coming up with this, because you've already established this is the one area where we've kind of written ourselves a sandbox.
Yes.
Because it seemed like Derek knew a lot more about born wolves than bitten wolves, right?
Right.
I feel like it should have been like the Argents are talking about, there's been kind of an unsteady truce between werewolves and hunters for a little while, that it's been, the understanding is like, we won't massacre werewolves and you won't be turning any more humans. So you can keep making more baby wolves, but you're not turning people.
Yeah.
And the alpha doing this is kind of breaking this agreement.
The rules, yeah.
And because of that, kind of people on both sides, the werewolves and the hunters, aren't as familiar with bitten wolves because they just haven't dealt with them in so long. So you have this long sort of family ancestry of lycanthropy, but they're not turning people like ever,
That's
and
cool.
So then you kind of create this little pocket sandbox of like, if we want to add some like new interesting stuff to the werewolf mythos where it would conflict with the way characters make decisions or made decisions earlier on, we'll just say, well, this only works for bitten wolves. So they don't know about it because there haven't been really many bitten wolves in the last 50 years or whatever because of this agreement, right? Yeah. So I think that is something that writers should consider doing is creating backdoors in the code of their characters, right? So that they can expand the mythos without making it feel like, well, that character's an idiot then. How do they not know that? They've been studying these things for 200 years and they don't know the answer? Like, that's a basic ass question.
No, it is. It is.
Right?
So.
Like, surely you guys have been scratched by werewolves before. You guys being hunters collectively.
Right.
Yes.
Kate was always just the one out doing the murdering, and she was always like in fight stuff. I just imagine like there being an Argent school, basically. They homeschool them and like, they have werewolf classes, but then they also just have like fighting classes. And she was just always doing that stuff and learning how, like, maybe wolfsbane chemistry would be like the most that she'd be interested in. So she can just come up with really up shit.
Yeah.
But she wouldn't be actually learning like the rules.
Yeah. She's like 14. She's like, so how much voltage can you use on a werewolf before they die? I'm asking for a friend.
It's not my cattle prod. I'm just holding it for a friend. I swear.
I do love this bit though, because a little bit later when Jackson and Lydia and Allison show up, Allison's gone inside and Lydia and Jackson are waiting for her to come back out. And Jackson notices the hood of the Jeep is all torn and dented open and all this. And I just wish that after this episode, they had fixed it. And then for the rest of the series, there'd just been like a weld scar along the hood of the Jeep to show where this battle damage had happened. And they just fixed it.
Yeah. I would have really liked that.
Yeah, that would be great.
Would have been a nice little touch.
Going back to Jackson, I do think he's just developing feelings for her as a friend.
Mm-hmm.
But as the episodes proceed, we do see that he's still willing to use her if he has to get what he wants. Like, he cares about her as a friend, but, he says horrible things, horrible, degrading things just to taunt Scott.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think we see a little bit of that in Lydia too, that I think she sincerely likes Allison and cares about Allison. But if she thinks that seducing the person that Allison is in love with serves her interests, she will do that. And that is where both of those characters are at the start of their respective arcs.
I love how they grow, though.
Fantastic. So good.
Even if Jackson's ends up happening mostly off screen.
I think I know why Peter always goes after Scott.
And I think it's because Scott's the first person Peter ever turned. And I feel like there's like maybe a strong connection there. He can't have failed the first time. That he can't turn someone and then it be a complete bust.
I have to wonder, they're running around the school from the Alpha. What happened to Derek's blood? Is it still like all over the parking lot? Do you think the nurse was going around cleaning it up after Peter as Peter's running around doing all his Alpha stuff?
I mean, that is a good question, because when we get to the end of the episode and they get out to the parking lot, we don't see a shitload of blood, which I assume there would be. That was a deep wound. And to Stiles's point, blood was just spurting out of his mouth. There had to have been a bunch of blood, and it doesn't seem to be there. Or if it's just the angle and there is a huge pool of blood, then I guess the question becomes, did they not try to figure out whose blood it was?
I feel like sheriff would have.
But see, that's okay. But the sheriff does not do his own, I assume, forensic pathology. And he seems to be the only competent municipal employee in the vicinity of Beacon Hills. So until he learns forensic pathology, there's going to be no one around who has the requisite skills to run a blood test.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I guess all the blood has been cleaned up because the janitor's gone too, right? You know, like
we do know that for sure.
You know, so
I don't think they address one way or the other whether there's blood where Derek was.
It seems like Stilinski is not wholly into, or not buying completely. Because I mean, we even have, you know, because Stiles says, no, you feel like sorry for me.
Scott says that.
Or Scott says that, but I feel like he wouldn't say that if Stilinski was like, yeah, there's no body, but so much blood. Like, I believe you, so much blood, but we didn't find a body. Because instead he's like, look, Scott, he said there was a body. There's no body. And he's like, I don't know how, because his tone is very much, if there's no body, there's no crime. But it's like, but there was so much blood, you know? So I assume that the nurse was just going behind them with a mop the whole time, cleaning it up. Because I mean, like, yeah, Derek would have bled all over the place, especially as he crawled away, because he's alive, you know, so he crawled away at some point. There'd be just like blood everywhere. And then all the janitor's blood is gone, you know? So, and I'm assuming since Stilinski isn't believing any of it, the nurse also put that door back into the frame and, you know, and all this stuff. So
and fix the holes in the ceiling.
Exactly. This is a little bit of a buy on the part of the show that I'm not super into, because I feel like there should be an orgy of evidence.
I love that.
That corroborates their
coming
story.
to CBS this summer. Orgy of evidence.
From Brian Fuller. Orgy of evidence.
Sheriff should be going to night school to study forensic pathology.
Hey.
Nice. Very nice. Well done. You know, spoiler alert, Derek's not dead, guys. Come on. You're not gonna kill that jawline so easily.
That's correct.
So you just imagine Derek just crawling with his last, you know, like his life's blood is flowing out of him, crawling underneath the window.
And he's hearing Scott throw him under the bus to all his friends. And he's like,
motherfucker. You know?
He's like trying to replenish all this blood he's lost, and he takes the time to be like, oh, God damn it, Scott.
So when the Alpha roars and forces the shift on Scott, Scott's eyes do turn yellow, but right before they turn yellow, they turn red. And I had actually never noticed this until our rewatch when y'all pointed it out to me. And I wonder if this is some kind of inkling that maybe Jeff had way back in season 1 of Scott's future alpha status. Because Scott does become an alpha later in season 4. I did write for this show. I know what I'm talking about. Yes. No, when Scott becomes an alpha in season 4, but he doesn't kill another alpha. He just becomes an alpha through sheer force of will when he's trying to save Deaton's life. And that's really awesome. And I wonder if Jeff had an idea for something like that at this point. Because, I mean, clearly that's deliberate. That was a deliberate choice to throw a little bit of red in there. You know, that wasn't an accident. So I'm very curious what y'all think about this.
I think it's possible. It might also just be brought on because the alpha, you know, is the one that forces him to shift. And I feel like it's a little bit of maybe the alpha power transferring to him. So maybe it's just like the alpha power, like surging through him in that moment.
I kind of wondered that if it was more like because the alpha made him shift and was kind of influencing him, that was sort of a visual representation of that Scott was under the influence.
Right.
That is cool. That is very cool.
And that concludes this week's episode of Return to Beacon Hills. We hope you had as much fun listening as we did talking about all things Teen Wolf. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at RTBH Podcast, as well as on Tumblr and TikTok at Return to Beacon Hills. If you'd like to ask us questions or offer suggestions for future topics to discuss, you can email us at returntobeaconhills@gmail.com. And don't forget to find us at patreon.com/RTBH podcast for more awesome exclusives. Join us here next week for our look at Season 1, Episode 8, Lunatic. Rate and review us on iTunes. 5-star reviews get a shout out. Have a great week, and we'll see you again soon on Return to Beacon Hills.
Dude, it's Beacon Hills.